Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was sent to the past when Kakashi was still a Chunin. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze had never felt so out of place. She, the daughter of Kushina Uzumaki, and the previous Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, also known as the Red Hot Habanero, and Minato Namikaze, the Yandere Hokage, and also known as Konoha's Yellow Flash. Naruto also had many titles and alias over the years. Some called her a demon and a brat. However, after the destruction of their home, she was known as a hero. Gamma Sannin of Mount Myaboku, child of prophecy, hero of the 5 nations, reincarnation of Ashura, bearer of the Rikudo Sennin's power, bearer of all 9-tailed beasts' powers, Rokudame Hokage, bringer of peace and uniters of the 5 nations, or of what remained of the nations. Here she sat before her closest allies who had survived the destruction of the 4th Shinobi War: Kakashi, Sasuke, Ino, Shikamaru, Chuji, Kiba, Hinata, Killer Bee and Gaara. One may ask what they were all doing or saying to make the one to help save the world so out of character. The answer was simple. They had asked her to take part in the CRA, also known as the Clan Restoration Act, as she was one of very few Uzumakis and Namikazes. Those remaining of her clans were scattered across the 5 nations. She had only ever met 2 Uzumaki, and that was Nagato, who was currently dead, and Karen, who was helping to keep the peace. After some time, Naruto still had not replied to them, so Kakashi stepped up and placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a nice smile as he did so. Come on, Naruto. Taking part in the CRA isn't that bad. Getting up from her chair in the Hokage office, she pointed at her old mentor. How the hell would you know? I'll be the one giving birth to all these children, to Bayo. And another thing. Why aren't you and Sasuke team taking part? You're literally the last of your clans. Kakashi gave her no reply but did pose as if he was thinking about her answer, so Sasuke went up in his defense. As a male, I will have no issue impregnating several of the CRA women in one go, whereas you can only have 1 or perhaps 2 children at a time if you have twins. So, I am in no hurry, especially since I am head of your security. I won't be there to raise my children. And there's another thing. I'm Hokage. I'm still dealing with the paperwork and meetings for the uniting of the 5 nations. So if I have kids now, I don't think I'd be able to spend much time with them. Ino's eye twitched as she refrained from punching some sense into the blonde, since she could be tried for treason. Naruto. Don't you want a family? She asked and gave a slight glare in the other girl's direction. The air around Naruto suddenly turned cold and Kurama's chakra leaked out of her, thereby releasing some killer intent as well. No one, and I repeat, no one wishes for a family more than me, Ino. It's something almost every orphan dreams of having and something I've been yelling about since we were kids. And you asked me if I want any? Her voice was quiet, which was what made her more fierce. Everyone in the room was reminded that she was the one to save them during a war that should have been saving her. Hinata spoke up as she held her hands up. She didn't mean it like that, Naruto. We all know you wish for a family. However, the way this conversation is going now is as if you don't want one. Could you tell us why? She tilted her head back and groaned loudly. This conversation was getting nowhere. I just said, I won't be a good mom until I have this work sorted. I will take part in the CRA after this paperwork and all these constant meetings and traveling is done. End of discussion. Now please, can I, Sasuke, Gaara and Killer Bee head off to where we're supposed to be? She let out a heavy sigh of relief when those who she had enlisted left the room. So yo! How we gonna go? Rapped out Killer Bee. Either by my Rinnegan, the usual way, or via Naruto's Hiraishin, stated Sasuke, and all eyes turned to her. The Rinnegan taxed Sasuke too much. Running would be a waste of energy and Naruto could easily teleport them to their required destination. She gestured for them to grab hold of her arm as she teleported them to the remains of Uzushiogakure, the home of the late Uzumaki clan. A few weeks prior, Gaara, Killer Bee and Naruto received word that a large beast was seen here with 3 tails. They had all written it off as someone trying to get them away from their homes. However, when people of their own village, Jonin and Chunin alike, who had been dispatched from missions not far from there, stated upon return that they had felt intense chakra signatures, that of a Jinchuriki, they decided to investigate. None of the 4 present had a clue what it could be, as all tailed beasts minus Shikaku and Gyuki were technically inside Naruto, but parts of the 1 and 8 tails power was inside Naruto as well. I don't sense anything, do you, Naruto? Asked Sasuke as he looked round, yet when he received no reply, he turned to look at the blonde only to see her eyes filled with tears. All 3 males turned awkward in that one moment. Naruto had always been an emotional female, however they had never seen her cry. Minus when her precious people died or when Sasuke came back, she had cried tears of joy. None of them could figure what was upsetting the blonde till Sasuke remembered as he saw a swirl on one of the ruined buildings. They were in Uzushiogakure, the home of the late Uzumaki clan. Whilst Naruto had never been here herself, Lady Mito and Kushina had, and their memories were a part of the 9 tails who had shown her what her family's home had once looked like. Now understanding what was upsetting his friend, he went up her too and took her in his arms as she softly cried into his shoulder. Looking over to Gaara and Killer Bee, he decided to tell them what was wrong. This place is called Uzushiogakure, the home to the late Uzumaki clan. Kurama had shown Naruto what it looked like after her mother spoke to her about it back on Genbu Island. Nodding, the other 2 went around to have a look. sending out their tailed beats chakra to try and lure out the creature that was scaring off people that lived nearby. Sasuke sighed as they walked off, happy to have some privacy. Naruto, we need you to calm down and sense what's here. Please? He asked as he gripped her face in his two hands, using his thumbs to wipe away her tears. Nodding, she gave a slight sniffle as Sasuke chuckled, good. Otherwise I would have had to record this and send it to everyone. Maybe to your relative back in Kumogakure? No. You know what he's like. He's liable to tell everyone in Takigakure. She yelled and whined at the same time. Now then, Lady Hokage. Will you help us do what we came here to do, or do I will to tell the Rookie 9 some of your secrets? He whispered the last word, causing her to shiver. The amount of things Sasuke knew about her that the others did made her happy yet frightened at the same time. Two could play at that game, though. She gave him a sickeningly sweet smile and tilted her head to the side before saying, if you do that, team, I'll tell everyone in Konoha that you cuddle and grope sleeping blondes that you're supposed to be guarding. I wonder what Hinata and Ino would do to you then, Now it was Sasuke's turn to shiver. When it came to the blonde, the two of them were very overprotective, a final wish they had granted from both Tsunade and Sakura during the perilous war they had fought. He decided to use a different tactic. He grabbed her by the waist and bit the lobe of her ear, whispered, and you say you don't like it, yet your body says otherwise. Besides, he let his hand wander down to her generous behind and groped it under her cloak, loving the fact she had worn shorts today. Whenever I do grope you, you never seem to complain. He whispered huskily, as he trailed little kisses down her neck, around her face, yet never on her lips, which caused her to whimper. Having had enough of his teasing, she grabbed him, on hand by the straps of his uniform and the other in his hair, and forced his lips upon hers, causing him to moan and place one hand at the back of her neck. They were too engrossed in each other. They had not heard the other two members of their party's return before Gaara spoke. It would seem I am owed money, as are some other people. Killer B, I should hope you are prepared to pay when I announce the news to the others upon our return. The couple moved away from each other, lightly panting. Care to explain why you are owed money, Lord Kazekage? Asked Sasuke as he unconsciously released some of his ki. Gaara's reply without batting an eye. Many of us that know you have placed a bet, some saying you are a couple, some saying you will never be a couple, and some saying you won't realize you have feelings for each other till after you get married to other people and start conducting an affair. I placed my bet that you are a couple. Aha. And just how many people are in this bet of yours, Gaara? Asked Naruto, whose face finally returned to normal. Myself, my siblings, the Rookie 9, Team Guy, the gatekeepers in both out villages, the Kage, Killer B and his team, the people at that ramen store you love so much, majority of Konoha, all the senseis at Konoha, some of Suna's citizens, and quite a few people that took part in the war, so a lot of the 5 nations. By the time he was done, both Naruto and Sasuke had shocked faces, Naruto's being more noticeable. Why are so many people interested in our love life? She asked. Sasuke, not wanting to go further into this conversation, decided to change the subject. So, did you two find anything? Gaara and Killer B gave him a pointed look that said, we know you're trying to change the subject and sadly we agree that we need get on topic. It was quite an expressive look, but Sasuke knew how to read people, as a bonus. Naruto, for her part, just sighed as they went along with it. It turned out that they had not found anything, so finally Naruto let out her senjutsu to see if she could sense anyone or anything around, yet could not find anything till she reached what she believed to be the entrance to the destroyed home, where she felt a large spike of ki coming their direction. Opening her eyes, a smirk graced her lips as she shrouded herself in Kurama's chakra as she directed them via the air, where she got a better view of what was up ahead in the land below her. From what Kurama had shown her, compared to what she could see now, all that remained of Uzushiogakures beauty was the sunset reflecting on its waters. Very few buildings were still whole, but the main buildings such as home, council halls, the academy, the hospital and many more had fallen. Yet it would seem the walls themselves had fallen down mostly in 1 or 2 pieces. One thing caught her attention. There were no bodies and she could see no graveyard. Where had all the people been buried if not here? Kurama, do you know? She asked as she entered her mindscape. She had long since changed it. What was once a sewer was now a forest, as the 9 tails sat in the center, which she had made to look like Uzushiogakure and Konoha's forests combined. There were trees and lots of water, some animals, and next to the fox was a waterfall and a little lake under it, with many stones going round it. No. And I have never bothered to find out, yet I see why this would agitate you. There are very few graves in Konoha that have the name Uzumaki on and a similar amount on the memorial stone. When we get back home, if I forget, remind me to ask around and to look into the archives. Someone must know, and if they don't, they have to be written somewhere. She returned to reality as she sensed and felt the chakra from earlier even more prominently than before. She squinted her eyes and went down so the others could hear her clearly. It's not Isabu or any of the others. But Sasuke, remember a few years back that crazy doctor and the 0 tails? When she received a nod, she continued, well, I think it might be someone trying to bring back the 0 tails and dash. She was cut off when a large burst of chakra sent her flying. The power was similar to that of her and Sasuke's Chibaku Tensei that they had trapped Kagaya and Black Zetsu in. She hit a wall, causing pain to spike in her back before she went back to normal and flew back to the others, only to see each of them fighting her. What the hell is going on here? She yelled in order to get someone's attention as they took out the fake Narutos. All three males turned to her and Sasuke asked, "Naruto, who kissed you first, Kiba or me?" In return she turned beet red and yelled, "Like I'm gonna give you the satisfaction of answering that, Databayo." "Yup, she's the real one," he stated with annoying smirk before gesturing for her to come to him. He had just killed someone that looked like her, he wanted reassurance, yet he would affirmatively deny it should anyone ask. He gave her a small kiss to the head before Killer Bee spoke, thankfully having dropped the wrapping for a short while. "Yo, I wanted to know why you wanted little Naruto to take part in the CRA if you're together." "Because we both have to take part in the CRA to revive our clans. I already have 2 merged clans to revive, adding a third would be near impossible." She would have gone into further details had clones of the late Itachi Uchiha appeared. "Oh, now that's playing dirty. You can't expect us to kill Itachi. That's just cruel." "I do believe, old friend, that they do not care," stated Gaara. Sasuke for his part teleported the clones to different dimensions, ones that hopefully would do a great deal of damage to those who dare pretend to his beloved big brother, as Naruto passed each one to him. Gaara and Killer Bee having no problem killing the clones, yet many times they were caught in genjutsus that Naruto had to break them out of. Once the Itachi clones were gone, clones of the tailed beast came and attacked, causing the 3 Jinchuriki to activate their powers and Sasuke to use the Susanoo to start fighting seriously. It was quite a sight to behold, with tails coming out of Naruto, Gaara and Killer Bee, but then to also see the Susanoo fly in the air with Naruto in order to fight up top as the other 2 fought on ground, mostly. What appeared to be Chome attacked Naruto as Son Goku's lookalike attacked Killer Bee, Saiken attacked Sasuke and Koko attacked Gaara, who was having a slightly harder time than the other 2 Jinchuriki. The 3 of them realized that the copies had all of the original's powers but could not fully utilize them, so the fights were not too hard to complete. Once Naruto finished her fight, she went to help out Gaara and jumped in front of him as one of Koko's tails was about to hit him, hoping to grab a hold of it, instead piercing her through the chest and the lower part of her neck. The edges of her vision blackened as blood and pain oozed from the hole the tail had created. Pain which felt similar to the time Sasuke's Chidori had nicked her heart. She felt hot, sweat forming on her face and other limbs as the tail slowly came out of her. The feeling of something entering her skin and slowly making its way out was unbearable. Deafly, she could hear screaming and voices yelling her name as her world darkened black, small dots going bigger till it clouded her entire vision. She could also hear the tail beasts within her, particularly Kurama, call for her before she fell to the ground and completely blacked out. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze gave her life for her friend, a fellow Kage and Jinchuriki. The Shinigami was waiting for her as were her friends. "Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, wake up and listen to me right now!" roared Kurama as his tails flew wildly around the mindscape. "Ouch, Kurama! What the hell was that for?" They were in her mindscape, however the last thing Naruto could recall was being back in Uzushiogakure. When she jumped in front of Gaara, her eyes widened. "What happened to them? Are they okay? Wait, what happened to me? That tail went straight through me. I should be dead." Kurama in turn hit one of his tails on the top of her head, causing her to cradle it due to the shock and pain he had induced. "If you'd shut up for 5 minutes I can explain." When he finally had silence he sighed and mentally thanked the Rakuta Sennin even though he had no part in silencing the girl. "You were on the brink of death, so I transported us back in time." He counted up till 4, to which he received a very loud reply which caused his ears to tuck against his head. "What do you mean you sent us to the past? Your loud voice is grating on my sensitive hearing, so stop it. I sent you back to save you. I don't know when in time we are. After all, I simply charged your damnable seal which you had been working on with my chakra. I hadn't meant to send us back too far, but I apparently had. Don't you dare start talking. However, you are now being looked after by your perverted teacher. Kakashi-sensei? No, the other one. Ebisu-sensei? The other one. The one with the toads. Oh, Ero-senin. Wow, now that I think about it, I sure do have a lot of perverted sensei. You yourself are perverted, so you have no room to talk. Now before I send you to the realm of consciousness, you may not hear from me for a month, perhaps even longer, as I will require time to regain my strength. And another thing, you are in the body of a 5-year-old, and cannot do what you could do at your older age." He pushed her out of the mindscape before she could tell him off, basking in the silence that it allowed. He rounded into a ball and closed his eyes, regaining as much energy and chakra he could as soon as he could. As Naruto tried to wake up, she tried to sit up, however there was a strong hand pushing her down and a wet cloth on her forehead. Opening her eyes, she was greeted by a face she had thought she would never see alive again. "Hey kid. Take it easy. You were badly hurt, though it seems you heal quickly since most of those nasty cuts are gone as well as those broken bones." He seemed to be talking at her instead of to her, he thought, so he waved his hand in front of her which caused her to blink rapidly and move back her head. Looking around she asked in a hoarse yet childlike voice, "Where are we?" She could see trees and boulders, plants and a waterfall, so she had an idea. Takigakure. About a half-day civilian walk from the borders of Konoha. "Hey kid, what's your name?" She thought about it for a moment. Essentially there was no reason to lie. Even if this man wasn't the same man from her own time, he always had Konoha's best interests at heart. She would leave the man to make his own decision at the end. She held out her hand and said, "If you'd like, I can show you some parts of my past to decide what your decision of me will be." Jiraiya furrowed his brows, confused by what the young blonde was going on about, however took her hand nonetheless. After all, she wasn't under a henge and his gamma would have informed him if something was off. As soon as his hand touched hers, it was as if he was being sucked into a void, entering a chasm of darkness before black flame lanterns lit up on a corridor. Deciding to follow it, he reached a few doors, something he wasn't sure was ordinarily there when it came to young children. A moment later, said child appeared dressed in the standard clothing of a Konoha orphan, which confused him further. This door, she said, her voice echoing within the corridor, as she opened the middle door. The door itself was gray but had white and yellow fuinjutsu scribbles around it. This is my mindscape, she said, her voice leaving whispers around the new corridor they were walking in. He was no Yamanaka, but he was certain she shouldn't have this many doors in her mind. I know a lot of information that's too hard to remember sometimes, so I've organized it per door. You're welcome to read the door names. He did as she suggested, reading each door name, however each one just confused him. First war. Second war. Third war. Fourth war. Tailed beast, a door per beast. Fuinjutsu double doors. Academy days. Genin days. Chunin days. Clans. Rookie 9 moments. There were many others, but those ones stood out to him the most. None of it made any sense. There was no such thing as the third war, let alone a fourth. Sure, they were on the verge of war, however it hadn't been announced. Instead of questioning it, he carried on walking, trying to ignore the feeling that he was being watched. They stopped at a bright-looking door which was already different to the others. However, he took notice of the dark intricate lines covering a large part of the door. This door leads to a mash-up of memories, good and bad, that made me who I am, who I was. He chose not to question her choice of words, feeling a bit like Minato in the sense that he found a very interesting puzzle he'd like to put together. However, it was a puzzle he wished he could remake, for no one should have a past as dark as hers. When they returned from her mind, after having witnessed her memories, both the good and the evil, he felt a need to empty his stomach. Konoha had damaged his goddaughter, Minato their yandame's daughter, till she could find no true happiness. He tried to process everything with a level head, Minato dying, Obito starting a war that destroyed 1/5 of humanity, Rin being killed, Kakashi bearing all that on his shoulders. Sunny's return, Orochimaru's defection, the Sandame's death, the death of her friends and allies. He knew she kept a lot from him, showing only fragments of her memory which Kyuubi had allowed him to see. Kyuubi alone had almost made him jump when he had appeared from seemingly nowhere. He didn't speak for a few minutes, so she looked down and saw she was wearing a red happy that she knew he wore when he wasn't in his war clothes. She looked up at him and glared when she noticed there were no clothes underneath, meaning he had seen her naked. Jiraiya came back to his senses when he felt a large amount of ki directed at him from the little blonde girl sitting across him. What is it? Why am I in nothing but your happy, Erosenin? If Jiraiya wasn't a war veteran, or a Sannin, he would have quivered at the glare alone, never mind the ki that she was radiating. As it stood, he was, and would not be bullied by a child. Yet he did have self-preservation instincts. He raised his hands and said, 1. I found you in tattered clothing that had blood all over it, so I had to put you in it. 2. What's with the Erosenin thing? Her eyebrow twitched in annoyance. However, after taking a few calming breaths, she spoke. You are a self-proclaimed super pervert who spies on unsuspecting women in the bathhouse. You are also a Sannin, so Erosenin for a perverted old sage it is. We will get back to that soon enough. But for now, what do you intend to do? She started at the darkness within the forest, eyes devoid of emotion. Fix our mistakes and the mistakes of my predecessors. Akatsuki, Obito, Madara, the Kage, all of them. I'll make sure humanity survives no matter what. Her hand clenched tightly into the haori she was wearing, the only sign that showed how she felt. He stared at her, once again as a puzzle he wished to piece together. However, gazing at her now, he realized she was more like a broken mirror which had fixed itself, missing pieces along the way. You keep that up, Erosenin, and I'll use my Sharingan to record the moment. That got him back to normal. Well, as normal as a self-proclaimed super pervert with little to no morals could be. Sharingan? Okay, I'm gonna tell you my powers capabilities. I don't have those powers now, but since I know what I'm doing, it shouldn't take me quite as long as last time for me to learn. Right, so I can make 1,000 or more shadow clones. I can do the Rasengan and other S and a rank jutsu no matter the element due to my Fuinjutsu skills. I managed to make a seal that allows me to use each element. I am a Gamma Sannin like you, but I don't take any frog-like features like you do. I added a change in chakra nature into the Rasengan and made it into the Rasen Shuriken. I have complete control of the Nine Tails chakra and we're partners as well. I also bear the power of the Rakuta Sannin. I gained that power during the Fourth War. I gained the light half and Sasuke got the dark half. I have the Sharingan, the most powerful if I do say so myself, but not from my power. It belonged to an Uchiha, obviously, and he made it as powerful as it is now. It's the Mangekyo Sharingan, and with it I can do the Susanoo, a Murderesu, and Kodo Amatsukumi, which is a powerful genjutsu, so great that you won't even know you're in it. I have the chakra of all 9 of the tailed beasts, and whilst they are all doing their own thing, they can meet up in my body. I think that about covers everything. Oh no, wait, I can do the Hierishin as well. Once again there was a pause as Jiraiya tried to consume all the information he was receiving. It was hard to picture the little girl in front of him at some point being able to do everything she was saying she could do, and had he not been in his sage mode he would have thought she was lying, or just plain delusional. One Kai later, and he was still in the same predicament as he was before, much to the blonde's amusement. As it stood, she was neither, so he had to accept reality. After what seemed like an age he finally spoke up. Okay, what is it you intend to do? Where will you stay? She seemed to deflate at his questions. To answer your earlier question, I don't know. Before becoming Hokage I was secretly promoted to Chunin and entered into the Hunter Corps. A role that befit me more than the seat of Kage. She smiled ruefully at the memory of her secret induction. Even Hunter Commander had been surprised. She trailed off, so Jiraiya took the lead. Why don't you come to Konoha with me? The war has yet to be announced, even though there is a lot of fighting going on. I can say you're Minato's father's daughter. He fled from Konoha after his wife had Minato, so we can say that whilst I was in aim he and his mistress found me and gave me you, before she passed away. I know they're dead, so they can't exactly claim otherwise. I can also say that when I returned to Konoha I left you with some people to look after you whilst I dealt with whatever the matter was. But when I found out it was about a war, I decided to come back to inform the people looking after you, only to find that the home they lived in had burned to the ground with them killed. You survived only because they told you to flee before they were murdered. That's when I found you and decided to bring you to Konoha. How does that sound? It was now Naruto's turn to look shocked. Her mouth was agape and her eyes were wide. She had no idea the old man was capable of making up such an elaborate story, but then again, he was an author who could pull a storyline out of a large pair of, so it was only natural he could make her a backstory out of his ass. Ignoring that, Jiraiya clapped and got up, picking his things and hoisting them on his back before picking her up princess style, and made his way back to Konoha, ignoring the blonde as she kicked, punched, and yelled till they made it to the gate. It was taxing Jiraiya a lot to not send the brat in his arms a nation from where he currently stood. The entire way from Takigakure to Konohagakure she had been rambling on and on throughout the journey, sometimes commenting about their surroundings, commenting what they had done here or there on their training trip, commenting how many times he had perved on women for his research, and ended up getting the hell beat out of him. He had been surprised, a happy surprise, to hear some of the things that came after this war. Children got to grow up like actual children and not as warriors. His happiness came down, however, when he heard that Danzo had been the cause of so much death. He wanted nothing more than to send the man to Mount Myaboka and torture the man, probably get Gamabunta to sit on him as well. But alas, he had no evidence, and to say to the Sandaime that a 5-year-old was his evidence would surely get him a one-way ticket to KID, Konohagakure Intelligence Division, or a mental health facility. Usually people had a problem with Jiraiya being the chatterbox, and now he understood their pain. They had made it all the way to Konohagakure's gates, and that was when the brat decided to stop talking and look awestruck, which Jiraiya didn't understand since she had technically already seen them before. So when he asked about it she replied, "They look smaller than I remember despite being shorter than I was the last time I saw them." After that, she didn't say a word. Instead, the citizens of the village were pointing and whispering about the child the Chunin was holding onto. He held no doubt that by the time he had spoken to his Kage that half the village would think he sired a child and decided to bring that child home, or some story along those lines. He stopped when he reached his apartment. He would have to keep her with him, so thankfully it was a very large apartment, enough for Team Hiruzen, never mind Jiraiya and Naruto. She seemed surprised, yet again, that he had an apartment, saying in the future he merely traveled like a hermit, and also proclaimed that part out loud as well. As he went by he spoke of the different shops and training grounds he frequents, saying that once the current term was over, he would enroll her, and not to his surprise she said she didn't care that she would be coming in midterm, she could handle anything they threw at her. He reluctantly agreed. They would not do very much till the next year anyway, so that would be enough time to train her body a bit. He could feel her giggling when they reached the tower, and when he asked, she said it looked old. So in turn he gave her a small glare and made his way up the roofs to enter through the window, only to see their Hokage banging his head against his desk. Sensei? What are you doing?" asked Jiraiya as he sat down across the Kage with the girl still in his arms. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage. The first thing Naruto noticed was he had no white hair. None. Another thing she noticed was he had no wrinkles but a simple thick black line under each eye. He also didn't look quite as thin as he had before his death. Said man stood up and pointed an accusing finger at the pair of them. You are the cause of all this mayhem. You have been in the village less than 2 hours and already people are talking about you. And I do not mean in the way they usually do. They are saying you sired a child and decided to bring that child here. Some are saying you bought an IWA or even Kumo child to the village. Explain so I may calm the nerves of the people. Naruto had never seen the Hokage lose his cool. He usually sent Irika to do that for him. For Jiraiya, however, it was a normal day. His sensei always lost his cool when it came to him. Or Orochimaru. Or Tsunade. Well, I can help you there. This is Naruto Namikaze. I was given her during my stay in AIM, and when I came back to Konoha I left her with one of my informants in Taki. So when I went to Taki I thought I'd tell them to be extra cautious due to all the fighting between Konoha and IWA, only to find them all dead and the home they lived in burnt to the ground. I found this one. when I went to wash in one of the waterfalls and she seemed to have been attacked and fell down the waterfall as well. She wasn't seriously injured, thank goodness. But I'm sure that has to do with the fact that the mother was an Uzumaki. She has no family, besides Minato who is her brother, and Kushina as a distant relative. And me, as I intend to adopt her. The Sandaime got out his pipe, which was not the same as she had remembered it to look like, and puffed it twice before replying. And how old is she? I'm 5. Spoke Naruto, shocking the 2 shinobi in the room, not that either of them showed said reaction. Well then Naruto, what would you like? To stay or go Taki? I wanna stay with Ero-sennin. She pouted for good measure, and wrapped her small arms around his neck, holding him close. Jiraiya gave a loud boisterous laugh. Well, there you have it, old man. She wants to stay. Now, can I have the papers to fill for her to be my adopted daughter, and to apply her into the academy first years? The Sandaime raised a brow at that. And why the first year, Jiraiya? She already knows what chakra is, and if was placed in that year group she may show her boredom is the form of pranks. Despite her looks, she is quite a clever girl. Go on, ask her something and most likely she will be able to answer it. It may not be in the best described way, though she is a 5-year-old, and all. Deciding to humor his old student, the Sandaime asked her, Okay Naruto, what are the basics of chakra and the elements? Well, chakra is spiritual and physical energy merged together that can't be seen because of the 8 tenketsu, unless it's manifested in large amounts. When using your chakra it has different nature, earth, wind, fire, water and lightning. With chakra you can do ninjutsu and genjutsu as well as others not so commonly used such as senjutsu. Did I miss anything, Aji-san? She asked with a foxy grin as the Hokage looked astounded, with his pipe hanging limply from his mouth. He cleared his throat when he heard one of his A and B guards snigger. Well done, Naruto. One more thing, do you know why you are named Naruto? Naruto tried her best to look like a child raking their brain, and that suddenly had a light bulb moment. Oh, I remember. It's because of Ero-sennin's book, The Tale of a Gutsy Ninja. The main character was called Naruto, so they named me Naruto. He gave her a gentle smile before riffling through some drawers and shelves for papers and handed them to Jiraiya. I need them done by tonight to make sure everything is in order, and for her to be put in the academy soon. Also, you need to place her under the guardianship of another shinobi or kunoichi whenever you are needed on the fields. He gave the Gama Sannin a look that expressed that he would be on the field a lot. I'll ask Minato, Kushina, Kagami and Mikoto. One of them will always be in the village anyway. Come on Naruto. Let's get you some clothes and anything else you need. He pocketed the papers and went off out the window, giving the Sandaime a half-wave half-salute as they left. They went to 4 different shops, one to get some simple black and orange clothes, another for shoes, and the third for weapons, specifically a katana her size as well as some shuriken and kunai. The 4th and final shop was where Jiraiya had some furniture and cutlery for Naruto sent over to his apartment. Once they finished shopping they went to a simple sushi place to eat and made their way back to Jiraiya's apartment. Naruto, at this time, was feeling slightly tired and mentally cursed her childlike body. They got to the apartment near 9 in the evening and Jiraiya requested she stay there and do whatever she wanted whilst he went to go speak with Minato. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat in his office as he contemplated what his student had said to him earlier. As it stood, he could tell he was not lying about most of the things he spoke about. However, when it came down to locations his cheek muscle twitched. Something Hiruzen had learned meant he was either not telling the whole truth, or he was simply lying. He did not think his student was capable of lying about something so important, so it went down to what place the girl was really from. Her hair coloring would suggest either Kumo or Iwa. However, at the same time, Jiraiya did say she was a Namikaze, so that could explain the coloring. He would have contemplated it further had it not been for his old teammates, Koharu and Hamiura, entering his office once again without permission to enter. Neither sat as they looked at their Kage, although he often wondered if they saw a Kage or a silly boy that had been on their team so many years ago. What do you know about Jiraiya and the child he brought back to the village, Hiruzen? Asked Koharu. He took a puff of his pipe before replying. The child is not his, however. During his stay in Amigakure, she was placed in his care. When he was asked to return to Konoha, he left the girl with an informant of his in Takigakure, and when he was dispatched there recently he saw the home burnt and the informant's dead. The girl herself had fallen off one of their waterfalls. The only reason she survived was because her mother was an Uzumaki and her father was Minato's father, whom we know has been dead for 3 years. The girl goes by the name of Naruto Namikaze and is very smart for a 5-year-old. Jiraiya is also intending to adopt the girl and have her enroll in the academy first year. She knows enough and more to be placed in that year, if not the year above that. Any questions? Do you intend to tell Minato and Kushina they have a relative here in Konoha? Asked Hamiura. The Sandaime stood up and looked out the window, gazing down at Konohagakure and her people. They have both had no families for years. They deserve to know they have living members of their clans, do they not? Of course they do. However, I believe Hamiura was trying to ask in his oblique way whether the rest of Konoha will be informed as well. It could be very dangerous since Kushina is a known Jinchuriki and Minato will be sent often to the front lines. This will cause him to have many enemies. Kumo already hate him for not being their own shinobi. The Namikaze were founded there after all. I will leave telling the public matter to Jiraiya, Minato and Kushina. It will be their decisions. Is that all? Yes, we believe so. Do we have your permission to tell the others that she is Jiraiya's adopted child? Asked Koharu, and when they saw the Hokage wave it off and nod his head yes, they left the room, bowing and bidding their leader farewell. As they left, the Sandaime made a comment, "I'm getting too old for this," and turned around to finish his paperwork. Minato was sitting against a tree stump as Kushina stood before him, reprimanding his lack of safety and his idiocy for trying to make his new jutsu without the proper safety measures when his old sensei came. "Minato! Kushina! I see he's done something stupid again, has he, eh?" asked the Sannin as he looked at Kushina with a sly grin. "Yes, he has. He was trying his new jutsu without being careful and nearly blew up his arm databane. Well, you know what they say about blondes. Hey! I'm right here, you know!" yelled a pouting Minato who had his arms crossed as he glared at his sensei, far too afraid to do so to his girlfriend. Clapping his hands, the Sannin gestured for Kushina to sit down as he did so also. "Right, I'm here to ask you guys something. I'm adopting a girl dash." He didn't get to finish his statement as Kushina started to squeal in delight about him finally getting a child. He raised his hand, his face serious, making Kushina stop her squealing as she quietened down. "I'm mentioning this because with a war about to start, I won't always be in the village and will need her to be looked after during those time periods. If I'm not her, she'll go first to Minato. If he's not here, she'll go to Kushina. If Kushina isn't here, I'll be going to 2 different Uchiha and ask if they will be willing to look after her. Any questions?" Kushina was the first to speak as she pointed a finger to her lover. "Why does the child have to go to him first?" she whined. Sighing, he replied, "Simple, her name is Naruto Namikaze and she is Minato's sister, but she is also an Uzumaki." Both sets of eyes blinked as Minato was the first to break the silence that had fallen amongst them. Sensei, I think I heard you wrong. Could you repeat that?" Jiraiya's eye twitched in annoyance. Minato knew he didn't like repeating things, yet he asked anyway. "I said her name is Naruto Namikaze, and she is your half-sister, as well as a relative to Kushina. I know this because she was given to me during my stay in AIM. Now, will you agree to look after her or not?" His annoyance was clearly showing in his voice. He had, after all, left said child in his apartment alone when anything could happen. "Of course!" They both yelled simultaneously, making the pervert cover his ears as he glared at them, to no avail. "We've both been without family for years. Of course we'll look after her!" yelled Minato, shocking the two of them. He was usually the calm one between the two of them and hardly ever showed this much excitement out in the open. "Tell us about her," he said after he had calmed down somewhat. His legs were still bouncing where he sat. "Well, she's 5 years old, she's smart, loud, has a lot of energy, she's kind and loyal but doesn't really like stuff most kids do. Tomorrow if you're both free, you can come for breakfast or lunch if you want, and you can meet her?" Lunch. I've got to train Kakashi in the morning, could he come to lunch as well if he wants to?" replied Minato, to which Jiraiya nodded tentatively. He gave them both the papers they needed to sign and went off, saying he had to return to Naruto, and that he would meet up with them tomorrow. Kagami Uchiha received a visit from none other than Jiraiya of the Sannin after 9 in the evening, much to the Uchiha's surprise. He had instantly assumed it was about the rumors that were circling the village about the child he had adopted, so he ushered the man into his living room and offered his some sake, which he gratefully accepted. "Kagami, you and I have been on missions together from time to time, and I know you already have a child to worry about. However, I was wondering if you could look after the child I adopted whenever I am sent out of Konoha. I warn you now that I will be called out often and dash." Kagami raised his hand to stop the Sannin from rambling. "You need only ask, and I will do it. However, I will need to see if the child gets along with my son and vice versa. May I know the gender and name?" "All I know is the child is blonde. Namikaze blonde with those sticking blue eyes as well." He gave Jiraiya a pointed look that said, "I know who she's related to, so don't bullshit me." So in return Jiraiya gave a chuckle. "Her name is Naruto Namikaze. However, her mother was an Uzumaki where her father was a Namikaze. I do believe they will get along, but it is your home and your life. I do intend for her to be put in the academy first year, so they will be on different years. But she's very clever and could be put in the year above." Kagami took a sip of his sake as he allowed himself a moment to digest the information. "What is she like?" At the question a smile, yet tentative smile, graced the Sennin's face. "She's loud and talkative, and is liable to make friends with a rock. Overall her personality is open and kind-hearted," but he paused thinking how he should phrase this. "She has her moments when she won't be paying attention, not because she's being rude, she just can't help it. Most shinobi who lived a life like Naruto had, they were sure to be suffering from PTSD or other trauma. Whilst he had no evidence she did, it would be best to mention it anyway." This caused the Uchiha raise a brow and was about to speak, but Jiraiya interrupted him. "She also has obsession for ramen and orange." At that, Kagami thought of two people, Obito and Kushina. Obito loved orange, Kushina loved ramen, and if the girl was clever like Jiraiya, she would be a combination of Minato, Kushina and Obito. He shivered but nonetheless gave a smile. "However, she's a lot mellow about the orange than Obito." At that, Kagami let out a small sigh of relief. Jiraiya left the necessary documents with Kagami should he agree and went off to deliver the signed forms to the Hokage and explained why not all the guardian forms were not there. 6 a.m. the next day Naruto was on her toes. When Jiraiya had returned the previous night he woke her up and explained where he had been, who he was with, and why he had gone to them. He spent some time explaining in great detail, yet she heard nothing after he mentioned her parents were coming over for lunch. So when she woke up she made as many clones as she could, only 5, and got them to help clean the apartment with her. It was mostly clean with the exceptions being the bathroom, floors and windowsills. After 10 or so minutes her and her clones finished cleaning and she released them, instead taking a hold of her godfather-made adoptive father and dragged him to the shopping district. She had an idea of what she would be making them: onigiri sashimi, ramen with chocolate and coffee-flavored cake. When they returned home she made 2 clones and they, alongside Jiraiya, started to cook, although it was mostly Naruto cooking whilst the Sannin helped cut ingredients. By 11 a.m. everything was done, save for the cake that would need some extra time in the fridge for the frosting to cool down, and not even a minute after Jiraiya set out the table did the doorbell ring. As soon as the bell rang Naruto's nerves became on edge, unsure on how she should act. Should she act like a child? Or should she just act like how she is now? She was pretending to be some sort of a protege, so it shouldn't be a problem to act like herself, right? She was not given any more time to go through her thoughts as her parents walked in. No, not parents, brother and cousin. The two were talking animatedly to Jiraiya till they saw her, and she squared under their gaze. It was not a judging gaze nor a glare filled with hatred. It was a simple look you give a person when you meet someone, something all people did, yet Shinobi did in a more scrutinizing way. Kushina was the first to stop the awkwardness in the room as she jumped and took a hold of the unsuspecting child and squeezed her to her chest, squealing sentences that Naruto could not make out as she was trying her very hardest to breathe within the suffocating hold. It had taken both Jiraiya and Minato to pry the red head off of the blonde, and as she did so, the younger female took large gulps of air in and held a hand to her erratically beating heart. After some time her heart calmed down, and she looked at the two of them. They were very tall, so she had to crane her neck up high to see them clearly. Seeing her struggle, the two of them crouched down to Naruto's level, Minato extending him hand out with a warm and gentle smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Minato Namikaze, your older brother." When she took hold of his much larger hand she felt a small electric shock course through her body, but did not allow that to stop her from forming a small and shy smile. When he released her hand he carried on with introductions. "And this very hyperactive woman who was squeezing you earlier is Kushina Uzumaki. Your cousin, as I'm told. It's nice to meet you." There was a small lingering silence that Naruto noticed and realized she hadn't introduced herself to them yet. I'm Naruto Namikaze. She wasn't sure how to introduce herself to them. These were her parents, yet they were not at the same time. She couldn't say she was the Rokudaime Hokage because there wasn't even a Yondaime yet. She couldn't say she was the Jinchuriki to the Kyuubi as he was sealed into Kushina. So she decided to change topics. Children often did that. "I thought someone else was coming to bail." "With you, I mean." She gave a glance at Jiraiya, out of confusion that she didn't need to fake. "Ah, you mean Kakashi. He doesn't do very well with strangers and asked to be permitted not to come. I hope that doesn't affect any plans you may have had?" he asked as he looked towards his sensei as well as his sister. "Not really. I'll just put his plates and stuff away then." The white-haired man moved to pick the extra table set away as he asked them all to sit at the table, Naruto refusing as she helped him in pouring the food into bowls for everyone to serve themselves. "The Gaki and I made this, well, mostly her. She didn't want me cooking, says it would give a person a bad belly for a week." He shrugged as if he took no real offense, but there was a small glare pointed in said girl's way. She shrugged. "It's not my fault you can't cook, Ero-sennin." Minato and Kushina both looked at each other as she called the Sannin that, and when they both confirmed via looks that that was in fact what she did say, they let out belly-churning laughs. Within these laughs Minato was trying to say something but no one could make out what. After a few moments he realized he was making fun of what his little sister said. She could take offense and get really upset about it, so he stopped laughing and took large gulps of air and stood straight. When he fully calmed down he went forwards and ruffled her hair, causing her to shriek and try to fix it, in turn making the two males in the room to chuckle. "Sorry. I didn't mean to offend you or your choice of name for sensei." Naruto blinked a few eyes and gave a smile shaking her head that meant she took no offense, and picked up the dishes to put them on the table so they could eat. Lunch was a simple affair, Minato and Kushina asking questions, some of which Naruto answered but mostly Jiraiya did the answering. It was the wisest course of action since she wasn't sure what story he was going to make her follow yet. However, most of lunch was filled with stories from the two Jonin, from the different missions they did to what Minato was currently teaching Team Minato. Once lunch was over the two lovers left, and the remaining two sages made their way to the academy. As they went, Naruto noted the various differences that had occurred after the war. Many shops that were there, currently were not there, trees were smaller, many she didn't recognize. Houses she didn't recognize were everywhere, but she thought that was most likely due to the Kyuubi incident, and not the war. When they reached the academy she noticed one very important object was not there. The swing that was on one of the trees she would often sit on as a child as she watched parents or family come and collect their loved ones. The swing she would sit on as she heard the families whisper and glare at her for being the Jinchuriki, people who she served to protect, who later celebrated when she returned after the war. So lost in thought she didn't notice her surroundings and ended up bumping into another child, causing them to trip forwards, thereby falling on top of the person that the first had been talking to. Both of them groaned as they got up. As they did so her eyes grew wide as she noticed who they were. Despite the fact they looked very young, They looked similar to the time during the Chunin exam's first unofficial test, Izumo and Kotetsu. It was when they started to wave their hands in front of her face did she notice a third person. Said person was laughing similarly to how she used to laugh when she was 13, yet this laugh was not covering pain. Seeing this last person made her heart skip a beat 3 times in a row and made her blood run cold. Obito Uchiha, the boy who started the Fourth War in order to avenge the death of the girl he loved. Thinking quickly she bowed to the future gate guards. I am so sorry. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. In turn the two of them chuckled and ruffled her hair. People seem to be very fond of doing that today, she noted. No harm done. But you really should watch where you're going. Don't want to get in any trouble now, do we, little miss? Said Kotetsu. She shook her head, of course. Thank you. I'm Naruto, by the way. I'm Izumo, and this is Kotetsu. The idiot in the back is Obito. Obito made an indignant noise in the back of his throat which caused the two other boys to chuckle once again. You guys. You gotta stop with that. I am a genin after all, whined Obito, causing Naruto to let out a small smile on her face as she allowed some ideas on how to stop Obito from going psycho run through her mind. Hey, I've got a question for ya, Naruto. Are you related to Minato-sensei by any chance? You look a lot like him, with the blonde hair and blue eyes. Don't really see much of those here. Well, we do, you know, the Yamanaka clan have those colors but not striking ones like yours. Naruto cut off his rambling and said, You're Obito Uchiha? The one on the same team as Kakashi and Minato? She tilted her head to the side as she took in his attire. Orange and blue jumpsuit, most likely with the Uchiha fan on the back and a very noticeable pair of orange goggles on. His outfit reminded her an awful lot like her own before she made genin and after, minus the goggles. She made a mental note to burn all her orange clothes when she got back. Obito's carefree aura changed and his smile turned into a scowl. Like that he looked an awful lot like the Uchihas she had known as a child. Mostly Sasuke and Itachi. I am. So, she looked to Jiraiya for help. She was still unsure as to whether people outside of their little bubble were allowed to know she was his sister. He gave her a curt nod. Yeah, I'm his half-sister. Cool. I get to see Sensei later and say I met his sister. Hey, have you met Kakashi yet? He jumped right in her face, causing her to jump back and take a protective stance, out of reflex. Though with her non-intimidating body, it most likely looked more comical than intimidating. When she realized what he said, she furrowed her brows. She didn't lie how rude he was being in regards to her sensei, but she didn't have any room to talk. She was often rude to Sasuke as well. When she looked back at him, she noticed Izumo and Kotetsu had gone somewhere else, and the corridor was mostly empty. Class most likely had begun again. That's you mean Kakashi, right? She asked, and when he nodded it took a lot of restraint for her not to laugh again. He hadn't even made a comment on her stance. Why oh why did no one ever think of that name? Herself included? Because you fantasized sleeping with him? Once. Maybe twice. And come on. What self-respecting, heterosexual female did not fantasize having Kakashi in bed with her, huh? Wait, I thought you were gonna be asleep for a while? I was going to, but I felt the need to comment. Good night, brat. No, I haven't met anyone besides you and Minato from your team. Before he replied he raised both hands in the air with his hands fisted, clearly happy about something. Yes. I get to rub it in the Tem's face. Naruto used every ounce of control in order to not punch him. Team Minato and Team Kakashi seemed to be very similar, yet they had the roles reversed. Where the Uchiha on Team Minato was a load-mouthed idiot, the Uchiha on Team Kakashi had a stick up the arse, which she assumed Kakashi had. She had heard stories from many people about Kakashi's Uchiha/emo phase. To add to the similarities to the two teams, Rin was a medic who happened to have a large crush on the emo of the team. The only difference was that the loudmouth of Team Kakashi was sleeping with the emo, which she believed was not the case with Team Minato. She hoped. Jiraiya chose that moment to interrupt and mention to Obito that Naruto needed to fully register for the academy, so he had let them leave, giving a wave as he left. That left the two of them to finish any paperwork that was required for Naruto to join the academy. Obito was late. Not surprising considering he was always late. The question was, what would his excuse be today? The three of them sat under the shade of a tree, each reading a scroll on different things. Kakashi about lighting release, Rin about medical ninjutsu, and Minato reading both about wind release and fuinjutsu. It was half an hour after the set meeting time when Team Minato heard a very loud shout. All three heads turned to look where it came from and were happily surprised to see it was Obito. Hey! Sorry I'm late. I was at the academy when I got sidetracked talking to Minato-sensei's sister. Kakashi scoffed and gave a glare. Out of all the lies you have come out with, that is by far the worst. Sensei doesn't even have a sister. He does. She looks exactly like him. Yellow hair, blue eyes. And she has, like, 3 whisker marks on each of her cheeks as well. He replied giddily. The mark of annoyance was on Kakashi's face, yet before he could reprimand the Uchiha for making up another lousy excuse, Minato spoke up. You met her? Did she mention me or Kushina at all? All 3 of his students looked at him. Rin and Kakashi was surprised, yet Kakashi's was better hidden and Obito looked happy. She did. She's the one that told me she was your sister. I asked her if she was related to you and she said yes. Kakashi. I wasn't making up an excuse. He pointed to the Hatake, who gave an indifferent look before replying. Just because you met a new person does not give you the right to be late. There are rules and regulations for a reason. Rules are made to be broken. Besides, there is an exception to every rule. We learned that in the academy, remember? Obito's usually warm aura suddenly turned cold as he glared at his teammate. Said teammate was unfazed as he turned his back to his team, requesting they start their training for the day. Minato decided to get them to spar each other, leading to both Kakashi and Obito being heavily bruised and injured, Obito a bit more so than Kakashi. The next day Naruto was enrolled in the academy, and came to class on time. She would not make a bad impression on the first day. She also had to remember it wasn't only her own reputation on the line but also Jiraiya's and Minato's. As she introduced herself to the class she looked around to see if she recognized anyone, and was not surprised when she realized she didn't recognize a single one of them. If her memory served correctly, this was the year Itachi was born, meaning sometime during this year the Third War would start, and Akatsuki would catch Danzo's attention. Yet he wasn't going to do anything about that till later. Having been sent back in time, there were many things she wished she had thought to ask about in more detail, but since she hadn't, they had to make do with the information she currently had at her disposal. Given her current power, there was very little she could actually do herself in order to prevent a great deal many things, but that did not apply to Jiraiya, who was free to go around as he pleased as long as he kept the Hokage updated. She had told Jiraiya to either go or send word to the AIM-3 to not trust Hanzo nor Danzo, even if they claimed to be there by orders of Konoha. As soon as she was introduced to the class, she took a seat in the back of the room near the window, and paid half of her attention to what was going on in it. She already knew all the information they were teaching anyway. After all, she was Hokage, which is something she wouldn't have gotten if she didn't know the history of the 5 nations and everything else important. It was going to be a long and slow year. The only thing she would increase was her body strength and capabilities. Of course, there were cases where children were pushed up a year. Kakashi and Itachi had been prime examples of that statement. But the person must have the right endurance and capabilities in a fight. She doubted she had very much of either or those things in her 5-year-old body. July 3 months. Naruto was bored. She was currently sat in history class learning about Hashirama Senju, the Shodaime Hokage, and she knew everything she needed to know and then some. After all, she had met the man. During her 3 months at the academy, she had run into a lot of people she recognized, yet some had to introduce themselves before she fully recognized them. Iruka-sensei, Mizuki, Hate, and Doto Akimichi, who she recalled hearing worked with her father during the war that would be announced later in the year. She had also met Izumo and Kotetsu a few times within academy walls. And much to her surprise, she had seen yet not met Asuma, Anko, Guy, Kurenai, and Ibiki. She was thoroughly pleased when she didn't see the Pedohibi with Anko, or she wasn't sure what she would have done. Yet knowing the old snake, he would simply brush it off as Jiraiya having taught her to test her abilities on him, or some crap. As she thought of the Hibi Sennin, she wondered when he would defect and if it was possible to stop that from happening. Fighting him was out of the question. She was nowhere near the Sennin's level at this point in time. A few more years and she should be able to do quite some damage to that smug face. She shook her head. If she kept thinking about him, she would get angry. If she got angry, the teacher would wonder why and get worried. She absolutely hated being pampered just because she was the adopted daughter of a Sennin and sibling to the Yellow Flash. She contemplated whether or not she should leave a clone in her place during the break. Yet thankfully the Shodai was on her side as the door opened and in came Minato Namikaze, her father-turned-brother. The teacher, a female, did her very best not to blush, and Naruto found she wasn't very irritated about that. Minato was a good-looking male, so it was obvious women notice it. As long as they didn't try anything, it was all good. He whispered to the teacher, Akira, yet Naruto could hear. I'd like to take my sister for some private training if that's alright. She gets easily bored and already knows the academic side of things. If she has homework, we'll take that and she can finish tonight. Akira-sensei looked nervous, unsure what she should do, yet when she looked at Naruto she understood what the older blonde was saying. Naruto looked as bored as she felt. She sighed and nodded to Minato before saying, Naruto, Namikaze-san is here to pick you up early. If you collect your homework, you can go with him. Naruto hid her joy quite well, yet she knew some happiness could be seen on her face as she made her way down the stairs to the teacher's desk, taking her homework on the Shodai and left with her brother. They were making their way to Training Ground 7 when she asked, Don't you have to be with your team, Aniki? Minato smiled and ruffled her shoulder-length hair, causing her to pout and fix it the best she could and, well, it's already past noon and we've done quite a bit this morning, so I let them go early to get some training in with you. Shihima smiled back and they quietly made their way to their destination. She wondered if this is what it felt like to have a brother. Or perhaps even a father at a young age. Ero-sennin had been a father to her when she was already a teenager, and even then, she was so engrossed in getting Sasuke back she hadn't thought to cherish these sort of moments with him. She had never thought he would die on her, the way he had. But Jiraiya would have wanted to go out fighting and in a useful way rather than on a sickbed. Yet it hurt nonetheless. When she had first met her father she had felt several things. Anger for sealing Kurama within her. Sadness that he had left her unloved. And happy to know he loved her even though she hated herself for all that she was incapable of. Yet here she was, spending time with her father, not that he would ever know who she truly was to him. He would forever think her his little sister, and Naruto found she didn't very much mind. When they weren't too far from the training ground, she felt a chakra signature that even after being in the presence of it, made her blood run cold before she reminded herself he meant no harm. Obito Uchiha. She found he was very much like Kakashi-sensei, always late for team meetings, yet not for missions, always had an outlandish excuse which was far more believable than Kakashi's. She wondered whether or not Obito was a fan of Ika as well. She wouldn't be surprised. Minato had either noticed or chose not to comment on Obito being there, but her inner prankster couldn't help it. Aniki? Why is Obito at the training grounds? Minato's head quickly turned to look at her, causing him to trip over a tree root, subsequently causing Naruto to giggle at the sight. The revered Yondaime Hokage, yellow flash of Konoha, triked over a tree root in the village hidden in the leaves. Oh, the irony was real. Minato did not allow this to deter him as he brushed off the dirt from his clothes and looked discreetly at his sister. And how would you know if he was there exactly? Neru. He had taken a very keen liking to shortening her name, especially when he saw the flustered look it would give her. She chose to ignore the name, and continued with the conversation at hand. I have Uzumaki blood. I'm good at sensing other people. Erotausen also taught me the very basics in senjutsu as well. It wasn't a lie. Whilst Naruto needed her physical body to be stronger, she did not have Kurama to tell her when she was being followed, or if someone she wished to avoid was nearby. Therefore she had asked him to help her with senjutsu without absorbing very much of nature's energy. She was slightly miffed at the thought of having to relearn the art of a Sannin of Mount Maiboku all over again, but conceded that there was nothing to be done about it. Minato raised a brow, looking curious and indifferent, yet she could sense he wasn't pleased at his sensei teaching his little sister something so very dangerous when she was so young. And how is that going? It's alright. He's not teaching me very much, but I asked him to when I noticed that some people were following me by looking through a mirror. I wanted to be able to sense when people are doing that so I won't get surprised by their presence. Minato nodded in reply. It made sense that she would want to learn for the purpose she stated, yet he was not happy that a 5-year-old was achieving things that an adult would. It made him think of Kakashi, who had made Chunin at the mere age of 7, robbed of his childhood. Yet Minato had taken the young Hatake under his wing in order to help him socialize, yet none of his hard work had come to fruition, much to his chagrin. The two of them once again lapsed into a quiet walk that did not last more than a minute as they made it to the training grounds. Naruto looked at the memorial stone, yet, pleasantly surprised there were no added names. That did not mean there were no deaths, it simply meant their bodies had been returned. Everyone was brought home. She was not naive enough to think that no one had died. They were on the brink of a war with the other nations after all. As they approached the center of the grounds, Obito looked up at the two of them. He had clearly been studying, as he had scrolls laid out in front of him that he had kept looking at. Minato-sensei? What are you and Naruto doing here? He asked as he stood up straight. Minato smiled at his student as he spoke up. Just thought I'd do some private training with her before she went bored out of her mind and did something. Don't even try to deny it. He looked sternly at her as she opened her mouth to say her defense. Sue. What are you working on there, Obito? He looked down at the scrolls and hurriedly picked and packed them, clearly having forgotten they were there. Yet he did not pack them away quick enough for Naruto to not notice what was on them, and most likely Minato as well. You're working on a katon jutsu? She tilted her head to the side, truly intrigued that he would hide it from them, or even training outside of the Uchiha compound. The Great Fireball is mostly for distraction purposes since it's easily noticeable and avoidable, especially since it doesn't move in different directions. If I had a katon affinity, I would want to learn the Phoenix Flower Jutsu since it uses shuriken as well as fire and is able to go in the direction you throw them at. Both Minato and Obito looked stupefied at the young Namikaze. It was not every day you heard a first-year academy student giving advice on jutsus to a genin. Obito groaned. Senii. Your sister is already ahead of me. I feel like. He groaned again, tugging at his unruly hair. There's no need to be upset yet. I can't even use my chakra for very much, yet you can do a lot of things I can't. There's no use knowing the theory of something if you can't do the practical side of it. She shrugged her shoulders. It was true, even in her own time. No matter how much you studied something, there was no use if you didn't have the affinity for it. Or in her case, it wasn't hard as she had the chakra of all 9 of the tailed beasts, all having their own abilities, giving her access to each of the elemental affinities. I can't even balance a leaf on my head, yet you can water walk. Minato's head looked to his student in confusion. He had yet to teach his students that. He had taught them tree walking and each of them individual jutsus that seemed appropriate, so how did he know how to water walk? And how did Naruto know that? He looked between his student and sister, not sure of who to ask, so he settled for his sister, giving her the look that meant he wanted answers. He wasn't disappointed. I was taking a walk by Naka River near the Uchiha district when I saw Obito walking on water. Academy students don't learn that. In fact, most genin don't learn that till at least 6 months into the program. Obito and Minato looked incredulously at her, wondering just how much she actually knew. This 5-year-old knew things that weren't even official, yet they had a sneaking suspicion that it had a lot to do with Jiraiya. She had been raised by him, or so they thought. When are we actually going to get into my training? It was that question that brought them out of their thoughts and back to reality. Naruto writing down the necessary hand signs for the Phoenix Flower Jutsu and Minato setting her a regime of training exercises to do, to which she argued about, since she already had her own. After looking through it, he begrudgingly admitted her one was better for her and allowed her to carry on with that, but told her she must attend extra lessons with one of her guardians, as if she wasn't secretly practicing by herself. After 3.5 hours of training, one for building up her speed, one for building her strength, one for chakra control, and the extra half hour was spent on helping Obito and getting the theory down. Needless to say, Naruto had a long way to go till she would be happy with her results. Minato had put his foot down when Naruto had hinted towards using some weapons, saying she had no upper body strength in order to use one without hitting something close to her, to which even Obito agreed on. She had been so engrossed in her training she hadn't thought about Obito being there at all. He reminded her of a combination of Kiba, Kakashi-sensei and her childhood self combined. That was not something many people would have liked in a combination, yet it worked very well for the to be mass murdered. Of course, she did plan on putting a stop to that. Putting a stop to Obito being crushed, maybe she would allow him to be crushed so that Kakashi could have a Sharingan eye and, after he gave the eye, then save him. Although she thought that was very cruel and heartless for her to do to someone so kind, Kakashi had done a lot of good with his friend's Sharingan. As if I have that many emotions left to care about that Uchiha bastard. Although she did have a couple of Sharingan eyes she had found in Danzo's hideout. He had stolen many and not implanted them all into himself, but people, namely the Uchiha, would question where he got the eye from. She would have to properly sit down for a full 24 hours with no distractions in order to fully think of what she wanted to do, and how she was going to do it. Once the time was over, the two males were slightly short-winded, yet Naruto was hardly fazed. She had been doing a different regimen from what she had shown Minato that even Guy-sensei and Lee would approve of. 1 week hadn't been enough to get her stamina back to what it was, but it was enough to see a difference in herself. All she needed was perseverance, and all would work out, hopefully. The next day when Naruto woke up, she was feeling very achy and sore. Her legs felt numb, yet also felt as if the tips of several kunai were running down them. Her arms felt far too heavy to lift, as if they were made of lead, and her back seemed to be bruised, yet the young Uzumaki knew it was not. She sighed, knowing this was a downside to Kurama being asleep. She would have to activate the healing process herself, yet she felt far too tired to do so. Huffing, she closed her eyes and felt for her chakra. Once she found it, she willed it to spread around her body in order for it to heal her. Kurama would usually do this part for her, but seeming as he would be asleep for however long he needed, she had to make do with herself doing it. It wasn't as if she was going on S-rank missions or anything. Heaving herself up, she saw the sun had just risen, as she had, a normal occurrence with the young blonde, since as long as she could remember, she had been waking up with the sun. Sasuke had been the exact opposite, always wanting to do things at night. Now it all made sense. She was the sun, reincarnation of Ashura, where he was the moon, reincarnation of Indara. The irony wasn't lost on her. When she remembered her role was to lurk in the darkness of the world to fix its corruption. She stood up and looked at her room. There were scrolls scattered across the floor, as she had spent a lot of time studying the laws which were in place in this time. They were mostly the same, with minor differences she would be expected to know. She was silently dreading going to the academy. Akira-sensei was a nice yet firm woman, much like Irika-sensei had been, and like all first-year teachers. She was reluctant to do much physical training, which was what Naruto needed to work on the most. She spoke to Jiraiya about it after she had cleaned her room and made them some breakfast, and the Sennin had said he would try and work something out for her. She was doing more physical training at home than she was in the ninja academy. She sighed as she made her way to the academy. She was slightly sore after all the training she had done, despite having healed herself. She would have to do more chakra exercises before she could heal herself fully without Kurama. She longed for the day she could return to her mindscape and have the angry fox scowl and talk to her, because despite his outward appearance he very much enjoyed talking to her. All she could do now was go there and curl around his fur, receiving a response through his tail, pulling her into his warm embrace. Once she made it to the academy, she bumped into a messy, dark-haired Uchiha. No, not Uchiha, he couldn't be. The only Uchiha who smiled was Obito, and this was most definitely not him. Oh. I'm so sorry for bumping into you, spoke Naruto, confused as to who this was. He gave her a small smile and replied, that's alright. My name's Shisui Uchiha. And I didn't hear your name, miss? Namikaze. Naruto Namikaze. She waited for the tiring response she had been receiving from everyone whenever she used that name, yet received a very refreshing look instead. It was as if he were staring at a puzzle with that he couldn't wait to piece together with a pure unadulterated interest, which caught her off guard. No one had looked at her like that before, minus Orochimaru, but he didn't count. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto-san. Raising her hands in a stop gesture, she spoke. No, please, no honorifics, please. I'm not a very polite person unless I need to be. She wore a grimace on her face as Shisui gained a mischievous smile on his own, yet he chose not to act on it. Chose was a strong word, more so he had no choice as the bell rang, signaling class starting in a few minutes. After all, honorifics were for people that deserved them, and seeing how Naruto had failed to save 1/5 of humanity, she was not fit for them. They bid each other farewell and made their way to their respective classrooms. It was only when Naruto caught sight of a crow that the name truly clicked. He was Shisui Uchiha, Itachi Uchiha's closest friend, the man who first reported the coup d'état to the Sandaime, whose left eye was stolen by Danzo and who gave the left to Itachi, then proceeding to jump into Naka River. The same Shisui Uchiha whose eye currently was in her very own right socket. By the Shodai could things get any more complicated. September 5 months. Naruto was once again bored. It was late at night, and she was out for a walk. Jiraiya had been sent on a mission, so she was supposed to be under the care of her beloved Aniki, yet he was out training with Kakashi. She could have gone to Kushina, but she was out for a mission. The last option was Kagami and Mikoto Uchiha, but she decided against going to either of their homes and instead went around the village. After having been in Konoha for over 2 weeks now, she found she hated being coddled, hated being showered with affection by being Minato's little sister, and hated when people treated her as a child. She hated a lot of things, was the summary of things. In fact, had Sasuke come back in time with her, he would complain about how emo she was being. She wandered around for about an hour before deciding to go and annoy the ANBU for a while. She could sense one of them following her, so she looked back, directly at him and waved, causing the ANBU to blanch, not that she could see it, more so feel it. Smiling, she made her way to where she had believed the ANBU were located and was thoroughly surprised when she saw the secret entrance was not there. She tried to sense for other people within, yet could not. She mentally slapped herself when she realized what was wrong. Due to Kurama's attack the night of her birth, many buildings and such had been destroyed, including the ANBU hideout. She tried to rake her brain. She had read a document on where the ANBU had previously located, but found she couldn't remember. She sighed as she dejectedly made her way back, but then thought to herself, I'm Naruto Uzumaki Namazaki. I never give up, Databeo. She carried on looking around the village, feeling for chakra signatures that she thought were ANBU but had not yet been promoted. She had been solely focused on looking for the ANBU. She didn't feel the chakra signature of one man, till he grasped her left shoulder, causing her to try and kick the person in the face, only for her foot to be caught. Yellow silted eyes gleamed as they looked at her. And what, pray tell, is a little girl such as yourself doing outside so late? There is a curfew for people so young. She suppressed a shiver and instead of answering his question she replied, I would appreciate it if you would let go of me, or I'll scream pedophilia. People tend to take me very seriously. He chucked, and this time she was unable to hold back her shiver. She had never liked Orochimaru and never will. When he released her ankle she moved back a few steps, damning everyone in the village as she wasn't old enough to have a weapons pouch on her yet. You didn't answer my question, little girl. She shifted her feet as she replied, I'm looking for the ANBU headquarters. He released another chuckle, causing her to move another step back as his eyes gleamed even brighter with fascination. It was never a good thing when Orochimaru was fascinated. It led to experiments. Lots and lots of experiments. Almost all the time being illegal. I wish you luck in doing so. And who might you be? Crap, not good. Not good at all. I'm a Naruto. And your last name? He asked as he took in her appearance. It was very obvious who she was related to, by looking at her and by the rumors circulating the village. I'm not obligated to tell a complete stranger what my last name is. In fact, I'm not obligated to talk to you, Databeo. So, bye. She turned to walk away when Orochimaru grabbed her by the wrist. Your features scream Namikaze, yet that verbal tick of yours screams Uzumaki. Tell me your last name, girl. She cursed herself internally for her idiocy, yet reminded herself her verbal tick had no filter, much like her mother. She was then saved by a very loud, Naruto. Never in her life would Naruto have expected to be relieved by the presence of Obito, nor had she ever thought she would be saved by him. Even if at the end he had changed sides. Obito was running up to her, Team Minato not far behind him. When they all reached her, Minato asked, Orochimaru-sama, may I ask what you're doing with my sister? At his question the Pedohibi released her, causing her to stand next to her brother, glaring at the Sannin. Minato looked back to her concerned before looking back to the Sannin, merely asking some questions. Naruto could feel him trying to look at her, yet she adamantly refused to give him the pleasure. And why is she so afraid? She isn't one to get scared so easily. Are you accusing me of something, Minato-kun? There was an underlying hiss in his voice and Naruto would bet her Sharingan eye he was glaring at him. She tuned out the rest of their conversation as Obito had taken it upon himself to introduce her to Team Minato. Naruto, these are the last two members of my team. This is Rin Noura and that's Kakashi Hatake. Naruto and Kakashi seemed thoroughly surprised by the simple way he introduced them, yet did not allow it to disturb them. Rin gave her a small smile whilst Kakashi simply scowled. Guys, this is Minato-sensei's little sister we've been telling you about, Naruto Namikaze. She gave the two of them a small smile as well as a small wave. It's a pleasure to meet you. Obito and Aniki talk a lot about you, she offered, receiving a grunt from Kakashi, which in turn made Rin ask him to be more polite. Kakashi and Naruto then proceeded to talk a staring contest, either backing down, despite the confused looks Obito and Rin were giving them. They only stopped when Minato patted them on the back, quite hard, causing them to glare at the taller blonde. Naruto, what are you doing out so late? He asked as he picked her up, placing her on his left shoulder, making her giggle. Ero Towson is out the village, and you were supposed to be looking after me but weren't home. She pouted at him, which caused his steps to falter, as he looked guiltily at her. I'd forgotten I had to look after you tonight. He looked clearly troubled for having forgotten so easily. I'm a terrible brother. Sensei told me yesterday and today I was looking after you. Hell, Kushina told me before I left the house I was looking after you. Damn it. You're not hurt, are you? Team Minato looked stupefied at their sensei. Their own sensei had forgotten to look after his sister who was only 5. I don't think even Obito is that careless, said Kakashi as he looked to the two blondes, the Uchiha releasing an indignant sound, denying what the Hatake had said about being careless. I'm fine, she hesitated, not sure what Orochimaru had told him. He sighed before asking, it's pretty late. How comes you're not in bed? I was bored on my own so I decided to go for a walk. She shrugged her shoulders as they made their way through town. Ayan said walk included looking for the ANBU headquarters. Asked Obito in a sing-song voice. Looking down, she saw him grinning cheekily at her. She gave a small glare before saying, well, there's always one following me, so why not annoy them? Everyone paused and looked at her. How would you know if an ANBU was following you? Asked Kakashi, doubt lacing his voice. I will have you know, there is one not far from here. In fact, the operative is right there. She pointed at the direction where the masked figure was hiding, behind some branches. The operative shined over to where they were before saying, your sister has been doing that all week, Minato. She has incredible sensory abilities. The male ANBU spoke, in a begrudging tone. Clearly annoyed that a 5-year-old could sense him despite being a high-ranked assassin, Minato simply smiled sheepishly as his spare hand scratched the back of his neck, unsure on how to reply. He had no idea Naruto was even able to sense people around her, never mind be able to sense ANBU. His happy demeanor changed, however, when he realized something. Why were you following my sister? I wasn't told nor had I requested that anyone protect her. He held back his ki, just barely, in hopes to not frighten his sister. The masked man simply replied, clearly unfazed by the Namikaze. Lord Hokage wished for her to be watched to see what she gets up to. It's no use, however, since she is able to sense us and won't do anything if she's being watched. Said person spoke up, that's not necessarily true. I was looking for your HQ trying to annoy you guys just as much as your presence has been annoying me. But I seem to be looking in the wrong places. But don't you worry, I am the self-proclaimed queen of pranks. I will not be undone or deterred by anything. Big words for a chibi. Grunted Kakashi, causing Naruto to look down and glare. I dare you to say that again, team, Naruto. Language. The exclamation of Minato did nothing to stop her from glaring at her old sensei. Guy and the others were not exaggerating when they said Kakashi had been far more emo than Sasuke had been. In fact, had Sasuke been here, he'd have complained at how moody Kakashi sensei was being. She tried to compare and see similarities between this Kakashi and Kakashi sensei. Hers liked hentai, this one didn't. Hers smiled, this one glared. Hers had manner, this one was a team. She could find not a single trait in their personalities that were even remotely alike. In fact, the only thing that was similar was his appearance. Gravity-defying silver hair and the mask. Sure, he had the same shade of eye color, but he had both eyes, whereas her Kakashi had a Sharingan eye which he covered. This Kakashi even carried around a Tanto. All in all, she liked her Kakashi a lot better than the one in front of her right now. She wished she could somehow transfer her memories into him just so she wouldn't have to deal with this Kakashi before an evil idea came to her mind. Hey, Kakashi wasn't your dad, like hated by Tsunagekyou's elder, Lady Chiyo? Naruto had originally learnt that fact from Lady Chiyo herself when they had gone to save Gaara from the Akatsuki. The lady had mistaken him for his late father, and jumped him in a surprise attack. Kakashi's eyes wide, yet before he could say anything, her precious Aniki did, Naruto. Do I need to tell Jiraiya-sensei to stop telling you things? It isn't nice to bring up one's dead parents. Nodding her head, she agreed, yes, quite. I wonder what is worse though, a father who faced the fate of the White Fang, or a father giving away his daughter to a complete stranger, knowing he is a shinobi, the one thing the father hates to most. Or my personal favorite, making the daughter the container of something she never wanted to be in the first place. She shut up and placed a hand over her mouth when she realized what she had just said. Now I've done it. If Kurama was awake, he would berate her further, but he wasn't. Minato's aura changed drastically that Naruto gasped and clutched her chest at the sudden onslaught on emotion that coursed through her via her father. Anger, betrayal, hate and anguish coursed through her as she fell off of Minato's shoulder and into a set of arms, whose she couldn't focus on. All she could focus on was how the air became dense. Nature herself had changed as well. It shouldn't have been such a surprise to her, really. He was a Sannin of Mount Myaboku as nature's energy flowed through him as it did her. Aniki cut it out. She gasped out, trying not to allow the pain to take over as black dots shrouded her vision. She was very relieved when Minato calmed down, sighing in relief as he did so. Naruto had never been able to handle mood swings, yet never had someone's sudden change of moods affect her so badly. She could only assume it was due to their bond of family, and through the gammas of Mount Myaboku. She tilted her head to see she had landed in the warm arms of Obito, causing her to suddenly feel much cheered. She tried to suppress the urge yet felt she could not. After a few moments of trying to stay away, she decided to screw it, and allow herself to fall asleep in the Uchiha's arms. Minato thought himself to be a very patient man. He was very used to many things, Kushina's energy, Obito's continuous tardiness, Kakashi's emo behavior, Rin's fangirl tendencies, and most of all, Jiraiya-sensei's terrible habit. He had never allowed his students to see any more than a happy, joyous blonde sensei that had too much coffee in the morning. But at this moment in time, he could not stop the onslaught of emotions that coursed through his veins, igniting a fire within his very soul. He didn't feel when Naruto slipped off his shoulder, he didn't care much for the gasps that came from his team, including Kakashi. He didn't register the pain his sister was in. All he could think about was the bastard that was his father. Minato had known from the beginning that his father wasn't worth any of his time, but now he begged to differ. His father was worth it. Had the man not already been dead, he would have sought him out himself and beat him an inch to death, over and over. How could a man abandon one child to father another? Only for his to abandon the second child to a shinobi, a type of person he hated with a vengeance. The icing on the cake was he had made his own child a Jinchuriki, forced his child to bear the title of demon container for the rest of her life. Even if she did have Uzumaki blood, she would die not long after an extraction. The anger and hate he felt for his father was suddenly changed and redirected. Instead he felt betrayal and anguish. Jiraiya had not told Minato his sister was a Jinchuriki. He could have helped. Kushina could have helped. He would have to have a long talk with his sensei later, in order to understand the reasons his sensei must have had to have hidden this from him. Aniki cut it out. He heard his younger sister gasp out, so he looked at her, and saw she was being held by Obito, in clear signs of pain. He bottled up what he was feeling and went to touch her when she completely passed out, yet Obito took an unconscious step back. The ANBU spoke up. I think it's best if you don't touch her, Minato. As I said earlier, she has great sensory abilities and your sudden outburst seems to have caused an overload to her. Adult emotions are not meant to be felt by 5-year-olds. With that, the ANBU saluted and went back into the shadows, yet he paid no further attention to him. Minato stood conflicted. He was the cause of his sister's current predicament, but until he calmed down, mentally, he couldn't touch her. Sighing, he gestured for his team to follow him as they made their way to his apartment. Once there, he sent a toad out to summon Jiraiya to his home as his team members left, Kakashi first and then Rin. It took some convincing to get Obito to leave. During the 2 weeks he had known his sister for, the boy had grown a strong friendship with the young blonde, yet she did not feel the same sentiment. In fact, she seemed rather cautious of the Uchiha, for what reason he didn't know. Obito and Naruto had a lot in common, yet she was also similar to Kakashi, minus the sour mood he was always in. Naruto had been placed in the guest bedroom he had been trying to make into her own. He had seen Kushina do the same thing in her apartment, as well as Kagami in his home. Although the latter had yet to actually meet the girl, he wished to be prepared for a time he would have to look after her. A knock at his door brought him out of thought as he made his way to answer it, not bothering to sense who it was, and was very much surprised to see it was his sensei. Jiraiya had a tendency to use the window or any other unorthodox means of entry. November 7 months. Jiraiya, to say the least, was very confused as to why his student would summon him via toad the moment he entered the village. Minato must have known he had just come back from his mission. He made his way over to Minato's apartment, mindful of the time as he had yet to report to Sarutobi-sensei, Orochimaru, and he had to go collect a scroll from the fire daimyo and to stay on the front lines to help them in any way they could. The journey for the average shinobi would have been a day there and back, yet it had taken the two Sannin less than the allocated time. They had a few run-ins with Nukenin, but they posed no threat. In fact, Orochimaru was the greatest threat once they had arrived. He was a very meticulous man and did not appreciate their ambush and had made quick yet painful work of them. Both men had been uninjured and Jiraiya had been silently miffed he had not caught sight of Tsunade. Naruto had told him where she had been, but that did not stop him from hoping to bring the woman he loved back to the village. He, in his own debatable opinion, was not insane. He knew she had never loved him like she had Dan, yet at the same time, there was a small part of her that had. He did not ask Naruto what Tsunade had been like when he had died in her time. Far too afraid to hear she hadn't been sad. Too afraid to acknowledge she had felt nothing for him. Sighing, he knocked on the door, too tired to go through the window. Without fail, Minato answered the door and looked briefly shocked. Clearly he hadn't expected Jiraiya to use the door over the window. After a few seconds Minato had still not recovered, so he spoke first. I have had a very busy day, Minato. Could you tell me what's bothering you so I can go home? If Naruto's awake, I'll take her with me. As soon as the Sannin spoke the name of the blonde male's sister, his posture grew rigid and his face shadowed a cold yet fiery look. Instead of speaking, Minato opened the door and gestured for Jiraiya to sit down, which he cautiously did. Jiraiya showed no outward look of distress or worry, yet he felt both, wondering what had caused his student to react like this. He guessed it had to do with Naruto, but was unsure as to what it was. Minato stood directly across Jiraiya, on the opposite side of the coffee table, which was littered with scrolls, ink and cups. Why didn't you tell me that bastard made her a Jinchuriki? He asked, no emotion showing on his face, yet Jiraiya was a sage. He could feel the rage Minato was feeling as if it were his own. It took Jiraiya a few seconds for him to register what Minato had said. What makes you think she is? He asked, unsure if Minato was speculating or informing. He crossed his arms over his chest, yet Jiraiya saw the way Minato's hands were fisted, not liking the way Jiraiya was handling the situation. She let it loose earlier that she was made into the host of something. My students had no idea what she was going on about, but I know what a Jinchuriki is and the toll it takes on someone. He paused, waiting for Jiraiya to say something in his defense, yet when the Sannin said none, he continued. How could you think it was alright for this to be kept from me? From Kushina? Both of us are Fuinjutsu masked. Jiraiya cut his sentence off, a small glare on his face as he looked to his student. And if I told you, what would you have done? Don't answer that. You would examine her seal, keep a watch on her behavior, see how she settles, observe how she behaves, teach her the ways of a Jinchuriki, and thereby robbing her of the childhood she so deserves. I will not have you, nor Kushina, do that, Minato. She is a child, and even if she acts like she is older, I will not have her treated in a way I don't see fit for someone her age. So don't make me the bad one in saying I've done you a wrong when I haven't. You may be family by blood, but she is more my family than she is yours. Family doesn't end in blood, Minato. Jiraiya was quite shocked by his speech, and so apparently was Minato. It wasn't very often he said anything out of a cool and laid-back manner, yet this conversation piqued his annoyance. He didn't like the way Minato made him out to be the one who had wronged them all. It was no one's fault. It was very ironic. Here Minato stood calling his father a bastard for sealing a biju inside his sister, yet he had no problem sealing the 9 tails into his own daughter. Naruto had lived a harsh life because of the decisions Minato had made. Jiraiya would be damned before he allowed Naruto to live a life like the one she had had the first time. He may have been stopped from taking in his goddaughter, yet no one could tell him what to do with his daughter. Not even her brother. Minato looked conflicted, unsure what to say next. He opened and closed his mouth, single words coming out yet no sentence came. He seemed at a loss for words. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed, head lowered with his bangs shadowing his eyes. I don't know what to do, sensei. The brother part of me wants the same as you do for her, yet the shinobi in me that is a Fuinjutsu master wants to check her the way a Jinchuriki is checked, to observe her like I have been informed Kushina had. I've not told sensei she's a Jinchuriki, and I intend to keep it that way for some time. She doesn't do anything that ascertains to her being one, so no one should suspect. However, if you go about it the way you think a shinobi would, you'll put her into a lot of trouble. She'll be removed from my care and placed into an orphanage, so don't say a word. His tone of voice and facial expression told Minato to obey no matter what. Jiraiya knew he was asking a lot from his student, yet at the same time he wasn't. This would be the recompense for what he did, or will do, to Naruto. Minato finally took a seat on the armchair and sighed, running his hand through his hair and tugged a few locks of his hair. Very well, sensei. But no, I don't appreciate not knowing this sort of thing about my own sister. Can I at least know which one she is the Jinchuriki of? He looked Jiraiya in the eye, and had the Sannin been a lesser man he would have caved under the forlorn eyes Minato was giving. No. The less you know, the less likely you are to get in trouble if word got out. Minato looked as if to protest yet held it back, knowing Jiraiya was right and as stubborn as Kushina. Jiraiya went home not long after, having checked on Naruto, and saw she really was asleep, not wanting to wake her up. He informed Minato he would come after breakfast to pick her up and take her to the academy. February 10 months. Naruto was very unhinged one day when in the middle of class she had been summoned to the main office to have a meeting with the headmaster. She stood in a room with many shinobi and kunoichi, all Chunin or above. She caught a glimpse of Orochimaru's eyes in the back of the room, hidden in shadows, yet chose to ignore him. She also saw an Uchiha she often saw, Shikaku Nara and Inoichi Yamanaka, the latter two often seeking out her brother, which often resulted in either them joining for food or a shorter training session. When she had first laid eyes on them, she felt a chorus of emotions run through her. These men had given their lives for the greater good during the First War, either flinching nor allowing death to make them cower. In their occupation death was common and expected, but it was another thing to know you would die within minutes. Shikaku had given those on the front lines advice, and Inoichi had transmitted it. She didn't allow any of her emotions to show. In fact, when she first saw Shikaku she had thought it was Shikamaru. The resemblance between the two was truly uncanny, especially since his face was unscarred. The headmaster and her homeroom teacher were also there, as well as the teacher for the class Irika-sensei was a part of. Everyone looked directly at her, causing her to shift on her feet. She had never been one for being stared at, despite always seeking everyone's attention as a child. Naruto, it's been petitioned by Lord Jiraiya, Minato, Shikaku, your sensei and several other people that you be moved up a year. I wholeheartedly agree. You are a very bright child whose intellect is on par with your own brother. Truthfully, we would give you a test and make you a genin if it hadn't been for the simple fact that physically you are not on par with other genin, and that would essentially kill you. This form, he raised a document and faced it towards herself, and she managed to make out signatures. Has been signed by everyone in this room as well as your brother and adoptive father. If you agree to move up a year, you would have to sign this. Everything else has been taken care of. Of course, should you choose to stay in your year, you will be given the option to move up whenever you wish, on the condition that you take an exam. What will you do? He placed the paper back down on the desk and folded his hands in a similar manner that the Sandaime does. Naruto knew what she would choose, to move up a year. Whilst the theoretic side would bore her slightly, The practical side would keep her up to par with her plans. Training in her own time or when she was taken out of school by Minato or Jiraiya would not be enough. Yet she dreaded how fatigued she would be at the end of the day. One would think that being an Uzumaki would give her a lot of stamina, and it did. Just not to the extent of what Naruto was doing to her 6-year-old body. I'd like to go up a year, she stated, trying to hide her nervousness, reminding herself that she would have to get up the ranks quicker in order to change all the bad that had happened. The headmaster nodded and handed her the paper and a pen in order to sign. 15 minutes later she was all set, and stood outside the door to her new class with her ex-homeroom teacher with her. Whilst her new class was still boring, but there were certain people who she recognized. Hade from the Chunin exams, Mizuki the traitor, Doto from the Akimichi clan and her personal favorite Iruka-sensei. Overall, everyone varied with their age. Iruka sat 2 rows in front of her, and as soon as the break alarm sounded, they immediately hit it off. It seemed he was very much like how she had been as a child, a loudmouth troublemaker. Placing 2 loudmouth troublemakers together was not a wise idea. The only difference between the 2 of them was that Naruto was able to control herself, much to her classmates' and teachers' relief. There was one other person in the class she had previously been trying her hardest to discreetly avoid, yet could no longer do so. Shisui no Shunshin was sitting right in front of her. She had been trying to avoid him because for whatever reason, her eye, which was actually Shisui's left eye, kept trying to activate. It made very little sense and a lot of control from Naruto to stop it from activating and having to answer many unnecessary questions. Every time she was within a certain radius of the Uchiha, her left eye would burn and the Kekkei would want to activate. There had been several times where it had, and she managed to play it off by closing it and pretending there was something inside it. So in the end, she made a short fringe over the eye which reached till her nose. When she had been questioned about her sudden change of appearance to Minato, Jiraiya had taken to saying she suffered from some sort of eye disease when in contact with too much pollen. And not hay fever but similar. Her new homeroom teacher had also questioned her new look and had asked her to change it back. However, a quick visit by Jiraiya and Minato had made his mouth shut. She was sure some sort of rumors about favoritism and such were circulating the academy, yet she couldn't care less. In her own time, far worse rumors had been spread. These children weren't nearly as creatively brutal with their choice of words. Of course, due to her eye, she had made sure to talk very little to the boy sitting next to her, which she found wasn't quite easy when he seemed to be very jovial. Naruto seemed to run into quite a few Uchiha with that personality and often wondered where they had all been before the massacre, since she couldn't remember any Uchiha being lively and smiling carefree. Unless it was Itachi dying by his brother's hands, in which case she had seen an Uchiha smile. She had also seen Sasuke smile. 93% of the time his smile was in fact either a smirk, or a cruel and sadistic smile that made one stiffen and shiver at the same time. In her time, only Kakashi had been able to ignore that smile. Another thing she didn't like was how the teacher liked to pick her constantly when she wasn't paying attention. No matter how many times she was able to answer with essay-like answers, he never seemed to learn and seemed to be waiting for the day in which she wouldn't know the answer. That day would never come, however, as she had learnt a lot about the previous Kage during the war and the laws, current and old for her Kage training that Tsunade had put her through. She had learnt about the 5 nations during her 2-year training trip with Jiraiya and about clans from Sasuke before he had defected. Once Jiraiya had taken over and the clan members of the Rookie 9 had filled in any gaps that were remaining. Overall, she had had many people teach her several things that this man, whom she believed dies sometime during the war, could only dream of knowing. The only useful thing she was gaining from the academy was even more training than what her guardians were giving her. Her muscle memory was absolutely useless since she had such short and weak limbs which she couldn't do much about without damaging her growth. The one thing she was getting better at was throwing her kunai and shuriken, before they would land several meters from the target, and now they could hit the rings. Whilst it wasn't perfect, it was clear progress and Naruto wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth. All in all, the academy was okay but could be better, yet she couldn't do anything about it. She had to be a big girl about it, as Jiraiya liked to say. It wasn't until group projects ensued that she knew she was screwed. The project was to be placed in groups of 2 for a survival plan. Each group were given a scenario and they would have to make a plan of the various ways out of it, then select one of those to present to the class. Your partner was the person sitting next to you. The second project was to make a timeline of Konoha from as far back as they could research. It had to include the 3 Hokage and Madara Uchiha's timeline. Naruto felt this one would be easier than the first. Despite everything, she was still not very good at strategy. Again, the person next to you was your partner. The third and last project was to stay in the home of the other partner for 24 hours. The catch on this one was, the guardian was not allowed to know you were there. There was some leeway, allowing you to be found 3 times, however each time you were caught, 10 marks would be deducted from the overall test. Once again, the partner was the person sitting next to you. Naruto was dreading all of these as they required her to spend lots of time with the Uchiha, and thereby lots of eye-gauging pain to resonate from within her very skull. She was very much looking forward to the day Kurama woke up in order for him to advise her like he always did. It made her realize how much she relied on the fox and made her appreciate how he always did so. Never again would she take the fox for granted. Both partners had agreed that Naruto would try to hide in Shisui's house since everyone at her home had some form of high sensory abilities, and he would be at a great disadvantage. However, they would do that on Sunday, and they would start their other 2 projects of Saturday. They would then do a section of each project on their own, and compile them together, and finish the last of them during the lunch break of the next Wednesday. They did have 2 weeks to complete their assignments, but there was a class field trip the following week that was for 3 days on the outskirts of the village. She assumed they would try to be quick about it as Konoha was on the brink of the Third War. They were currently walking over to hers and Jiraiya's home, and as soon as they walked in, a kunai flew to them, causing Naruto to unconsciously activate Kurama's shield. It had been an automated response that had caused her to activate the shield, and she would have cursed her survival instincts. Granted, the kunai melted away, but due to the sudden rush of chakra to her small untrained body, Kurama's chakra was corrosive. Her skin burnt her flesh till you could see the pinkish-red muscles beneath. She fell onto her side, restraining herself from crying out from the feel of her flesh being burnt and repaired. Kurama had finally awoke, and whilst she should feel happy he was trying to protect her, he had simply caused her further pain. Kurama's chakra had not had this effect on her since before the Fourth War, which had been nearly 4 years before she had been sent to the past. Every nerve in her body was sent alight as a sudden gust of wind from the open door blew over her open muscles, causing another bout of pain across her body. Without her bidding, tears leaked out of her eyes onto the floor. Vaguely she could hear Jiraiya asking her questions as he simultaneously yelled at her brother, and another person who was in her home who she couldn't figure out who. Deciding she needed to distract herself in order for her to not feel the pain, she tried to figure out who might have been there. Since it was late in the afternoon, it would either be Kushina or Kakashi. He seemed to enjoy stalking her brother when Team Minato wasn't around. However, seeing as Kushina had been dispatched for a mission for nearly a week and wasn't due for another day or so it had to be Kakashi. The distraction had not taken long for her to deduce, causing her to refocus on the matter at hand. Apparently Jiraiya was using what little knowledge he knew on Inryo ninjutsu, yet it wasn't necessary. Within a few moments she was feeling a lot better. Slowly she unscrewed her eyes as she sucked in large gulps of breath. After breathing in and out several times, she got up, one arm behind her to support herself, the other clutching her head as she scanned the room and her audience with screwed up eyes. Minato, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Shisui and apparently Obito were all in the room staring wide-eyed at the girl on the ground. She hadn't been able to sense the boy till now, yet she blamed that fact on her pain, and not because he was able to outsmart her. This was not the Obito Uchiha who had started a great war because of a dead girl he had loved. She chose not to say anything as Kurama had yet to heal her vocal cords. She made a mental note to thank him and curse at him at the same time. The thought reminded her of what Sakura had once said, that Naruto had a tendency to act like a lovable tsundere at times with the guys she met. When she had asked the pink-haired female which males she had acted like that with, she had not specified. Minato and Jiraiya were saying something, but her ears hadn't been healed yet either, so she had to look at their lips, making a gesture that she couldn't hear and to slow their talking. Minato was talking way too fast for her to read. Once he had understood her, he repeated what he said. What happened, Naruto? What was that orange light that surrounded you? That was the extra chakra I have inside me. It works as a defense mechanism at times, but since I can't use my own chakra, it burns my skin. But it doesn't pose a threat if I use it when I've trained. And how do you know that? You can't possibly know that, Naruto. If the chakra is that corrosive, you shouldn't use it. Ever. Sensei. I shouldn't have listened. Minato didn't get a chance to state what he shouldn't have listened to Jiraiya on as a blur of orangish red hit Minato over the head. All eyes followed where the tail came from, which made them look to Naruto, who had just noticed she had 7 tails out. She mentally praised Kurama for that. The 7 tails. Chome belonged to Takigakure, where she had told everyone she had been for over a year. It made sense if Minato fathers had been there. He traveled a lot after all. Kurama receded the tail and she spoke. You have no right to judge them. None of them chose to caged. How would you like it if you were being a chakra, capable of leveling mountains and forced to be locked away into a person that can barely fit in with its people? I don't think you'd like it very much. So stop with your judgments. If a person acts kind to someone hated for so long, Kushina would have so much better luck with her as if she didn't treat him like an animal. This was what she always hated, when someone judged the 9 Bijou when they had done no wrong. They killed the humans that tried to kill them. They were no different to humans. The only difference was Shinobi killed for a price, they did not. When you look at it in that retrospective, humans were worse. The Bijou had loved the Sage of 6 Paths, a human, and had expected to be loved by others like him. At first that was the case, but then they became feared for their strength and power, which was then sought out to be controlled and harvested for mankind's own selfish desires. Her mother had caged and chained Kurama up, whereas her father spilt him into 2 different parts, half in herself and half in himself, and thereby with the Shinigami. He had no right. Naruto, they are capable of leveling mountains, driving men to insanity. She had finally managed to get up and glare at him fully, once again irritated by her short stature. And how is that any different to us? Lady Tsunade can crush a mountain with her bare hands, and the ANBU Black Ops are more than capable of driving a person to insanity. The only difference is we choose not to understand them and instead choose to fear them. We have robbed them of their freedom and rights when we fight for our own. She faded off when she saw she wasn't getting anywhere with him. All he knew about Bijou were what he had been told by others who didn't understand. The Shodaime should never have interfered with the Bijou. if he hadn't they wouldn't be in this mess. She looked around and saw a very confused Kakashi, Obito, and Shisui. Jiraiya had an impassive look ghosting his face as he took in their conversation. Naruto had never discussed the 9 bijou this passionately before with him around, and she could almost hear the clogs turning in his mind as he processed and pieced together all the wrongs that had been committed. Sighing, she raked a hand through her hair and spoke to Jiraiya. I came here with Shisui over here. He sits in front of me in class. We've got 3 projects to do together. We're supposed to be paired with the person next to us, but we sit in threes, so the person on the right gets paired with the person on the left of the previous row where it works. Tomorrow I'll be working with Shisui on the first 2 projects, finishing it off at home, and Sunday I'll be hiding at his house, trying to not be sensed by Kagami-san. We'd have done it here, but since everyone in my family is a censor, that isn't fair. Jiraiya picked her up on his shoulder as he ruffled Shisui's hair, gesturing for him to take a seat on the sofa next to where the other 2 boys were standing. Minato said something to the 2 boys when she hadn't been paying attention and had left them in the care of Jiraiya. Apparently Jiraiya had promised to look after the 2 of them as Rin spent time with her clan. Naruto would be joining them after they decided what to do with Shisui, since Kagami had also been dispatched on a mission and wouldn't be back till the next morning. After some tea and change of clothes, they decided to allow Shisui to train with them, causing Naruto's eye to unconsciously twitch and thereby glare at Jiraiya for agreeing. Not that she blamed him. It made sense that he would look after Shisui since the boy's father had agreed to look after her should a situation like that arise. Not long after that, the 5 of them made their way to do some training, Naruto getting a better insight on where exactly Kakashi was currently in his training. She saw where Obito was almost every night as he trained with her and whoever was teaching her at the time, and on the odd occasion she decides to train on her own as well. Watching everyone train and work hard together brought a smile on her face. During the war and after it, she had been unable to imagine Obito and Kakashi-sensei being anything like her and Sasuke, but they truly were. Yet it seemed as if they were getting along a lot better since she had arrived, as Obito had started to train even more than he had before, as well as having taken to helping her study on things she really didn't need help with. She feigned ignorance for him though, as he seemed to want to study the materials properly, and she was making the task easier. She wondered what this change would bring. Would Kakashi and Obito get along as they had towards the end of the 4th Great War, or would their friendship turn into pure hate and destruction once again? Even if Naruto intended to fix things, there was no guarantee that she would be able to do anything, and there was only so much she could ask Jiraiya to do on her behalf. So far, he had gone to AIM and found his students, all 3 healthy and alive. He had given the message she had requested he give to them, and she prayed that Nagato and Yahiko had heeded the advice. If Yahiko never dies, then Nagato never goes crazy, meaning he would never resort to using Madara's ideals of peace, thereby leading to no war. However, that was debatable. If Obito saw Kakashi kill Rin, there was still the possibility that he would start the 4th war. Her best bet was removing Madara from the scene entirely, yet that would not end the cycle. She would have to get rid of Black Zetsu in order or peace to finally reign eternal. As she watched Shisui training, however, her vision changed into the Shisui Uchiha she had seen on the odd 3 occasions, however on none of them did he see her. He had been training, and once he had been with Itachi. The boy was incredible, and Naruto would wager that if he had been alive, and if Danzo wasn't the war hawk she knew him to be, then a lot of pain would never have ensued. Her plan for Danzo was a simple and slightly flawed one. She planned on poisoning him and leaving a fake suicide note. Hamura Abd Koharu were old idiots in Naruto's mind, but they truly thought on Konoha's welfare outside of war and in it, yet all Danzo had been able to see was war. The most fatal flaw in her plan would be how to get past all of his root operatives, and why he would kill himself. She would prefer doing it soon as to prevent him from causing trouble in AIM, yet she would have to further strategize, an area she often left the Shikamaru to do. She doubted Shikaka would be willing to help kill the man even if he was a war hawk that deserved death for his crimes. Hiruzen looked down at the reports in front of him, then back to the ANBU operative kneeling before him. Naruto Namike seemed to have very sharp sensory abilities which were causing him large bouts of grief. How was he supposed to tell if she posed a threat to his people if she knew she was being watched? No one acted like a criminal whilst under the scrutinized eyes of the law. However, despite being watched by the ANBU, she didn't mind pulling the occasional prank which miffed the guards, as they had barely seen her commit the felony they were almost certain she had committed. Alas, there was never any viable evidence that she was the source behind such deeds, and that was why she had not been summoned to the Kage office. The Sandaime sighed as he gestured to the ANBU to leave him, and not a moment later they left via Leaf Shunshin. Not a very discreet method to leave in his own opinion, but it hardly seemed to matter to the latest generation. As well as reading over the reports on Minato's sister, he was also reading over the reports on the latest academy graduates. Might Guy, Genma, Ebisu, Kakashi Hatake, Rin Noira, Obito Uchiha, Ibiki Marino, Asuma Sarutobi, Karina Yahi and Anko Mitarashi. They had all so far shown good camaraderie, on missions at the very least, and had improved their ninja skills quite well in the last year. Obito Uchiha seemed to have shown the most results in skill, where Kakashi seemed to haggle the Uchiha far less as well. Orochimaru's student, Anko, seemed to be excelling in comparison to the rest of her peers. Hiruzen once again sighed at Orochimaru's use of the bell test. Using it to be rid of the other two members of his team was cold and meticulous of him. Yet he had the right, since they were not ready. He decided to skim through rather than thoroughly read them, as he would receive a final report within a week's time on how they progressed, where they improved and what needs improving on. This would correlate perfectly to the Chunin exams, which was another of his concerns. The alliance between the 5 nations was teetering, and Hiruzen was at a loss on what should be done. In his life, he had participated in 2 wars, one which he had led. To have a third in his name would be the final kunai. How could he claim to be a good leader when he keeps sending his people to die in the front lines? The Second War had barely ended 5 years ago, and even then, his people were not fully recovered. He doubted any of the other nations would be in a better shape than Konoha. As Jiraiya and his old team had suggested, he would send word to the other Kage on reinforcing their alliances. Suna and Kiri were most likely to form a stronger bond, as they didn't have Inoki nor the hatred of the current Raikage. Suna and Kiri had the most to gain from Konoha as well. Better trade, supplies and outside alliances had been made by Konoha as the founder of the hidden villages. Techniques outside of clan techniques could be taught in exchange between them also. Jiraiya had also mentioned doing a teacher exchange program where they would swap Jonin and Chunin instructors to teach in the other nation. This would allow the children to be taught in the ways of another nation, giving better insight to infiltration missions and such. He wrote the letters with vague details and requested they write back as soon as they could. He wrote the letter to Iwa and Kumo, yet he doubted he would receive a reply from them. The Shodaime had managed over 20 years of peace during his reign as Hokage. Hiruzen would strive to make his reign of peace last a long time, even if the time was not the same length as his teachers. Just as he thought he could leave, an ANBU operative came in, slightly short-winded by the journey here, he assumed. Yet when he saw the operative's mask to be a person in charge of watching Minato's sister, his back straightened further, as he awaited the inevitable bad news that would ensue. Earlier today, Naruto, Namikaze and Shisui Uchiha went to the home of Lord Jiraiya straight after school when a kunai accidentally made its way over to the 2 children once they had taken off their shoes. When the kunai was a meter away from Namikaze, she released a large amount of orange chakra which burnt her very skin. She fell to the ground in pain, and the elders rushed to help as the youngsters were frozen. Lord Jiraiya used simple Inryo ninjutsu to heal her, and by a minute's time she had completely healed. There were no signs that she had been burnt. Minato and Lord Jiraiya got into an argument of them having not said something to you when 7 tails came from behind Naruto, one hitting Minato over the head. Once the tail had receded, the two got into a heated argument about Bijou and their comparisons to humans, Naruto stating they were misunderstood and Minato stating that they had done nothing to deserve a human's trust. Once Minato left, another operative came to take my place, and I left to report this to you at once, Sandaime. Hiruzen had not interrupted the operative, and he sat confounded by what he had been told. The implication that Jiraiya had bought a Jinchuriki in the body of Minato's little sister into the village without telling his leader was somewhat understandable. Jiraiya had had to watch the way Kushina grew up during her time in Konoha, and she had had it bad enough being an outsider. If anyone would have found out she was a Jinchuriki, she would have had it far worse. It did not, however, mean he and Minato would go unpunished. Minato, even if the girl was his sister, had no right to keep this sort of information from him, and he sent a messenger to fetch the elder Namikaze. He would have requested for Jiraiya to also be bought if he didn't know the man was looking after several children today. Not long after he had sent the messenger did Minato come through the door, clearly having come here not by the word of the messenger. Hiruzen gestured for Minato to sit down as he prepared himself for another long night. Minato stood before his Hokage with the assertiveness that came with having fought in a war. He would take responsibility for not having told his leader the truth. However, by the looks of it, someone had already informed him of what had transpired at Jiraiya's home. Minato was not cruel. In the short time he had known Naruto, for he had loved her. He had loved her from the moment he had heard he had a sister. When he met her, it was as if he could breathe easily. He had never known he was alone, yet as he first gazed at his sister, he realized how lonely he truly was. She was his sister, his family, his blood, yet she had this stubbornness that would surely be the end of her one day. He had to make sure that she lived, no matter if it meant betraying her trust forever. He'd rather be hated for being himself than to be loved whilst living a lie. He also had a duty he had not completed by withholding information from his leader about her. He had been blinded at first, yet this episode had been the final straw. He would not allow the beast within her to be the cause of her death. He would sacrifice himself before he ever allowed his only family to die. When he had seen the bright chakra form around his sister, his initial reaction was shock. However, when she fell to the ground, gasping in pain, skin burnt and rapidly healing, he had known he made a mistake. He could have stopped her pain before it had ever happened. He had allowed Jiraiya-sensei to delude him into a false sense of safety, yet could not hold much blame to him. This was where his emotions clashed. On one part he was angered that his sensei would put his own kin at risk, but the other part understood why he had done so. To take the bijou out of her would surely sign her death certificate, however that didn't mean he couldn't fix her seal. Minato. I just sent a messenger to get you. He raised his hands to place silencing seals around the room as he dismissed the ANBU in the room. The previous week Naruto let it slip she was a Jinchuriki, so the next night I had confronted Jiraiya-sensei about it, and he confirmed she was indeed a Jinchuriki. He told me I had no right to judge her or make her feel like a monster that constantly needed watching. He reminded me of the life Kushina had lived when she arrived as a foreigner, and had anyone been informed of what she held, her treatment would have been much worse. I didn't want that life for her. However, that is no excuse for my negligence of informing you. Neither of them had said what she was Jinchuriki to. However, today I caught a glimpse of 7 tails protruding from Naruto. She subconsciously released a sudden burst of its chakra and it covered her whole body when a kunai came her way. The chakra was very corrosive and burnt her skin. She healed moments later and got into an argument with me, saying the bijou were misunderstood and no different from people. She gave examples. She also knew Kushina held a bijou, though she didn't specifically say which one. I figure she knows. She seemed to be defending all 9 of them. He was unsure what else he had to say. Minato had always been on point when telling the Sandaime anything he needed to be debriefed on, however this went into his personal life and was not a mission report. It was his informing his leader that his sister contained a demon inside of her. I understand that this isn't very easy for you, Minato. However, you and Jiraiya will have to face the consequences of keeping such vital information from me. As she is family to the both of you, I will be lenient. However, should this occur again, a more severe punishment will have to done. As Jiraiya and yourself will be needed outside of Konoha often, both of you will rotate shifts on night guard duty. For now that is all. I will have the same talk with Jiraiya. You are dismissed. As Minato left, a rock fell into his stomach, metaphorically. His throat clogged and he felt as if he had committed a sin instead of relieving himself of one. Telling the truth should have made things better. Little did he know it would do the opposite. Naruto watched as the 2 rivals sparred. It was sight to behold. Obito fought with everything he had, yet Kakashi was making quick work of any attack coming his way. She expected nothing less of the boy who made Chunin at 6. Both of their fighting styles were very different to the styles they used in the future, so she watched the 2 spar religiously. If she ever had to go against them in either a friendly spar or battle, she shouldn't expect the attack future them would dish out, but the one they were capable of. It was ultimately a different type of spar compared to the ones they would fight during the 4th war, when both had been in their prime and had mastered the art of the styles they used. She felt her heart ache at the thought of what pain Kakashi-sensei must have gone through with the thought that they were no longer sparring but fighting to the death. Kakashi moved his hair out of his eye, causing hers to twitch. Future Kakashi had the common sense to place that hair out of his headband and not under it. She would have to rectify her child sensei's hairdo as well as his mannerism and attitude to his teammates. Her list seemed to be growing and growing, yet she wasn't getting anywhere. As it was, she could barely summon her chakra on her free will. Her only consolation was she could tree jump with chakra, but tree walking was out of the question. She had tried and ended up blowing the tree up as well as hurt her feet to a degree, yet she somehow managed to water walk. Shisui was practicing shuriken throwing, and granted she should take in his footsteps, yet instead decided to meditate and focus on her chakra. Crossing her legs, she closed her eyes and placed her fingers back to back. Breathing slowly, she felt for her chakra. It wasn't easy. In this form her chakra was hidden, so at first all she could feel was nature's energy, but decided against going anywhere near it before she could handle her own. She could somehow feel Kakashi's and Jiraiya's chakra, which irritated her, yet she forced herself to try again. One would think with her large chakra reserve she would find it easier to locate, but for some reason she had been struggling to do so. She had borrowed a book from Jiraiya about chakra locating and found a chapter on how different people found their chakra in different ways. He had asked why she didn't already know this and gave him a bland look. Her teachers hadn't been the most informative when it came to teaching the Kyuubi brat. Minus Iruka-sensei and Kakashi-sensei, the latter was simply lazy, but he had taught her the things she would never forget. Those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. After the war she had learned Obito had been the one to say that to him, yet she had a hard time believing it. However, now she could easily believe him. She focused back on her chakra, thinking of the color, scent or taste of it. Thinking of the color made a large difference, as she located Kurama's chakra surrounding her own as if protecting it, or caging. It could go either way with him. Kurama's orange chakra had taken the form of 9 tails encompassing hers. She didn't like how her chakra was blue, she much preferred when it came out to be orange or yellow. Deciding there was nothing much she could do about it, she focused on reaching it, yet was abruptly shaken out of her meditation. Literally, Kakashi, Obito and Shisui seemed to be shaking her, hitting her head and poking her. Glaring at all of them, she waved her hands to fend them off her. What was all that for? She stood up, wiping her mud off her trousers as she continued to glare at them. Obito pointed to where she was sitting. The grass had grown considerably, whereas Kakashi pointed to the trees which had grown leaves in the middle of autumn, and Shisui pointed to some plants that were a few meters from them which had also grown. Looking around, she saw no sign of Jiraiya, so she spoke. Yeah, where's Erotausen? Lord Jiraiya was summoned to the Hokage. He told us to get your attention when he was leaving, and we became more frantic about it when everything started growing. What were you doing to cause all that? Asked Kakashi as he folded his arms, eyes scrutinizing all of her. I was trying to reach my chakra. She didn't know what else to say. It was all she had been doing. She hadn't even touched the power the Sage of 6 Paths had granted her. Discreetly she checked her right hand, but it was covered, meaning she couldn't check the sun mark on it. He looked skeptically at her yet decided against asking any further questions. I need to take you home. Obito will take Shisui to his house and you're coming to mine. He seemed reluctant to take her. Not very surprised, Kakashi, even future him, had been reluctant to allow anyone in his home. She had only seen his home when he invited her over, or when she followed him. However, each time he had known she was there, welcoming her with open arms. There had been a short duration of time she had been his lover, between when she returned to Konoha and when Sasuke came home. No one had known and it hadn't lasted very long. However, even after he had confided in her, that this Kakashi was so closed off to her, yet she knew it was just how he was. Bidding the Uchihas farewell, they slowly made their way to Kakashi's home. Once there, she had been surprised to see it was the same building as he had lived in before Pain's attack. She had chuckled and he glared at her lightly. What's so funny? Honestly, nothing. Your apartment building just reminded me of something back home. Konoha is your home now. You should get used to it. She smiled at him, and she felt his chakra jump. Deciding to tease him slightly, she latched onto his arm, dragging him to where she knew was his apartment. She ignored his protests as she gripped his wrist and dragged him up the stairs, ignoring the looks and glare they were receiving. At first she had thought they were to her but then realized they were to Kakashi. Gritting her teeth, she stopped at his door, gesturing for him to open it. Doing so, he welcomed her in, somewhat reluctantly. Removing their shoes for sandals, they made their way into the living room. She spied 3 photos on the mantelpiece. The first was facing downwards, yet she knew what it was. It was of Kakashi and his father, Tsukumo. The second photo was of his and Minato, when he had been made his apprentice. And the third was his team photo. She sat awkwardly, trying not to look around the place as it was make Kakashi feel out of place. One thing about the apartment bugged her. Kakashi didn't have any Niken in it. It felt so bare and cold without them. He made tea and sat on the armchair opposite her. There was a simple 3-seater sofa and one armchair next to a small desk and lamp. There was 2 bookshelves filled with books and scrolls, and Naruto knew in his bedroom there was a large desk and another bookshelf, both filled with scrolls and books. They were all categorized in some sort of system Kakashi deemed to be the most understandable. When she had tried to find something in her own time, she had tried and given up after 5 minutes. Then Kakashi had emerged and taken out the book she was looking for. His system never made any sense to her. Do you mind if I take a look at your reading materials? She asked after 10 minutes of awkward silence. He gave her a reluctant nod, and in return she gave a bright smile as she browsed the shelves. After 5 minutes she still couldn't make sense of his wacky system, so she spoke with her back turned to him, not wanting to see his face as she spoke. I didn't mean offense the other day when I mentioned your father, Kakashi. Tsukumo Hatake did what he thought best, and the village shunned him for it. No matter how much good he had done, nothing brought him out of the darkness the village had put around him. No matter what people say, no matter how much they glare at you and whisper about your father, he did what he thought would take away the pain, and that you are so different you hide your pain through following the rules. I hide nothing. The rules are made to be followed. It's why we have them. My father chose his comrades over the mission, and in the end they and the rest of the village hated him for it. Instead of facing the consequences, he took the selfish way out. She turned around and looked at him, a sad smile on her face as she gazed at him. I won't try and change your mind. I know you won't change it yet. But know this, I will always try and make you see the worth of your comrades. No one is dispensable. We are not weapons, we are people who deserve to be loved. She hadn't realized she had moved towards him till she was in front of him. Her head only reached the middle of his chest, which annoyed her. She hated being short. His shoulders were rigid as she hugged around his torso, his arms frozen at his sides. You deserve to be loved and not glared at. No matter what the villagers say, no matter how much they glare and whisper, their opinion doesn't matter. They don't know you, they didn't know your father, they have no right to judge, so don't let what they say get to you. Kakashi felt warm despite his cold exterior. His warmth wrapped around her, and as she closed her eyes, his warmth encompassed her into a peaceful slumber. Naruto began to fall, which was when Kakashi instinctively grabbed her to him. She had fallen asleep, shocking him as to how she could sleep that quickly. He looked to the clock and cursed. Minato-sensei or Lord Jiraiya would be there at any given moment, and here the girl slept. He raised her slight figure, shocked at how little she weighed as she debated where to put her. He could put her on the sofa where he would get yelled at for not being very hospitable, and if he put her on his bed Minato would go ballistic and not listen to reason. He felt it was safer to put her on his bed and stay in a different room to her, this way he wouldn't get told off by the Chunin and his sensei combined. Placing her on his bed, he wrapped his sheets around her and watched as she burrowed into them, curling her body around the sheets as she grasped them tightly. He looked around and found his extra pillow and placed it where her arm was, a small smile making its way on his face as he watched her hug it close. Once he noticed he was basically being a peeping Tom, he left the room, door ajar, and sat on his armchair. He thought about what Naruto had said, about his father and the villagers. She was right on one thing, he wouldn't change his mind. No matter how determined the hyperactive blonde was, he was just as stubborn. At some point he must have fallen asleep because he jostled up, shocked by the banging going on at his door. He saw Naruto rub her eyes as she sat up on the bed, Quickly he checked the time and saw it had been just a half hour since she had fallen asleep. He went to the door quickly. The only people who came here were Lord Jiraiya, Kushina and Minato-sensei. To his surprise, Minato and Jiraiya both were at his door, Minato having been the one to abuse his door, causing him to glare at his sensei. "Were you trying to break my door, sensei?" He gestured for them to enter, walking behind them after they did so. "You didn't answer when I first knocked. Where is Naruto?" He pointed to his bedroom door as the blonde emerged, smile bright yet tired-eyed. She ran past Minato and straight into Jiraiya's arms. The Chunin raised her high, smile wide as she laughed, and jumped in his arms. "Dad! Where'd you go?" She pouted and folded her arms in front of her. This behavior caused him to take a step back. Whenever he had seen the girl, she had been nothing less than a mature child, yet now she's acting like an actual child. She completely ignored her brother, who was standing not far from Jiraiya, a distant sadness clouding his eyes. Jiraiya chuckled. "Sensei called me into his office, that's all." She titled her head to the side as she let her arms wrap around his neck. "Do you have to go on another mission?" "No, brat. He just wanted me to answer some questions, that's all." He ruffled her hair, and looked to Minato. The smile on his face vanished as he regarded his student. "Don't you want to say bye to your brother, Naru?" She pouted before looked at his sensei. The light in her eye dimmed slightly, as did her smile, yet she maintained her large smile. "Bye, Aniki." She gave a wave and then looked to Kakashi, who was now very short compared to her. "See ya, senpai." He raised a brow at the endearment, but waved back at her nonetheless when they left. Once again an awkward silence fell into his home. He looked to his sensei, who had sat down, hands dragging across his face. "Sensei? I think I just screwed things up with Naruto royally. And I don't know how to fix it." "What do you mean he wants to tell the people?" yelled a very shocked Naruto. Jiraiya and her had just gotten home when he had told her what had happened at the office. "He won't be telling everyone. But he will be telling your sensei and whoever ends up as your Jonin instructor, teammates, as well as whoever looks after you. The ANBU will all be informed, at least the ones who watch over you. You will also be watched more closely whilst in the village. He also wished to talk to you soon." He reluctantly replied, worried what her reaction would be. "You mean to tell me the Sandaime intends to make my life a misery a second time and doesn't even know it? At least this time they won't be blaming you for the deaths of their loved ones," offered Jiraiya, unsure what else he could say in consolation. When the ANBU had come to escort him to the office, he knew what it would be about, yet had hoped beyond hope that he was wrong. He had thought Minato valued his sister's love more than he showed, yet clearly he had been mistaken. He didn't hold blame to his student. After this incident there was no way for the Sandaime not to be informed, since the ANBU were watching Naruto closely. That didn't stop him from feeling distrust towards his student. He said he hadn't wished this for Naruto, and here they were. History was repeating itself. Sort of. "I'm sure with the limited amount of people being informed, things should work out a lot better." He gave her a smile and got off the sofa, broadly claiming he was going to cook dinner, which in turn caused her to look thoroughly repulsed. Naruto was being scrutinized, making her life very much harder. She kept glaring at the ANBU following her around everywhere, and had asked Jiraiya to tell them to come inside when they were at home so she didn't have to feel like she had eyes burning into her very soul. Shisui and she were in her home with Jiraiya doing yet another project together. This project was supposed to be done with a third person, however, as there are 38 people in her class, one group had to be a group of 2, and to make it easier, the top boy and girl were placed in one group. They both laid down on their stomachs as they discussed the purpose of each weapon and poison to the best of their abilities. She had to hand it to the boy. Despite having no experience, he was getting majority of these things right. It was no wonder Itachi had taken to his cousin as a child. She liked how Shisui was nothing like most of his shinobi clansmen. He laughed, smiled, made jokes and wasn't condescending. He was the exact opposite to Sasuke, who was a complete flirt, and had a stick up his arse. Shaking her head, she looked back to her assignment. They were currently organizing where nerve toxins came from. Shisui said frogs and toads, whereas Naruto said snakes. Her argument was that frogs and toads could do no wrong and that snakes were pure evil. He had given her the stink eye, stating she was biased as both her brother and adoptive father held the toad summons, to which she couldn't refute as it was true. In the end they had asked Kakashi, who was playing a game of shogi with Jiraiya, and he had agreed with Naruto, causing her to stick her tongue at him in the name of her victory. Shisui had grown on her, and ever since Kurama had woken up the pain in her eye had gone, yet she kept the hairstyle as otherwise it would start suspicion. She had been ecstatic when he had officially woken up a day after the incident with Minato. She understood where he was coming from. She had been Hokage and had to make hard decisions. That did not mean she couldn't be moody towards him. He had literally made her live a life as a known Jinchuriki twice now, and to top, she couldn't understand the Sandaime's logic. No one had been told that Kushina was a Jinchuriki besides the absolute necessary people. It made sense in a way. It was a time of war, and he had his duties as Hokage to complete, keeping the village safe no matter the cost. However, to forsake her was just plain cruel. May 13 months, Shisui watched as the young blonde threw her shuriken. She had been the only one besides himself that had managed to hit in the target, yet by her facial expression she didn't seem happy about it. That confused him. It was like she expected more of herself than what she was able to do. His new classmate intrigued him. She was a foreigner yet was treated kindly as she should, however he suspected it was due to her family. Then there was her eyes, so bright, expressive and blue. He had never seen a shade of blue like her eyes. He had heard people whisper how it should be made a crime that she hid one of them all the time. The other thing that intrigued him about her was her cheeks. More specifically, the whisker-like birthmarks on them. He couldn't look at her and not compare her to either a cat or fox. Cat because once he had scolded her for passing a message with a samban to Irika who had been sitting in the row in front, yet it had just missed Shisui's face by a hair. He couldn't stay mad and had ended up apologizing to her instead. It reminded him of when he had scolded a cat in the district, and he had apologized to the cat straight after. He liked to compare her to a fox because she was crafty, and whenever they took classes outside she took a stance that simply reminded him of a fox. He had also never seen a child his age as clever as she was, not even he was as smart as the girl was, and he had been in the academy a lot longer than she had. He had told himself to not get jealous as she had Jiraiya of the Chunin as an adoptive parent and Minato Namikaze as a brother. It was only to be expected she would hold a lot of information. She's very talented, Naruto I mean. Spoke the spiky-haired brunette beside him, Hate Gecko. She's the only female in our year that managed to get close to the target. He had never seen a child his age as clever as she was, not even he was as smart as the girl was, and he had been in the academy a lot longer than she had. He had told himself to not get jealous as she had Jiraiya of the Chunin as an adoptive parent and Minato Namikaze as a brother. It was only to be expected she would hold a lot of information. There was one thing that bothered him. She was an open person, yet at first had seemed so reserved from him. However, he preferred that to her deep hatred from Mizuki. Whenever the boy was anywhere near her she would glare and shut out all chances of conversation. He was unsure why she seemed to hate him, but something he had learnt was that Naruto had good sensory skills. If she felt someone was bad news, it was best to follow her lead. In fact, many members of the class had adopted this habit, and taken to saying very little to the boy, while not completely. They still spoke to him, not completely ignoring him. Humming, Shisui replied, "Well, she's being trained outside the academy as well, just like the clan kids in our year. Me included, I guess so. I wonder what it's like to be related to Minato and Lord Jiraiya." Shisui shifted on his feet, unsure how to answer, as he had been going over to the blonde's home often to do assignments, and had seen the tense air between her and her brother. Lord Jiraiya himself had also been tense as he had regarded his student, yet Shisui chose not to comment as it wasn't his place to do so. "I'm sure it'd be lively." It was like that indeed, at least when it was just Naruto and Lord Jiraiya. If she was with Minato she would have a strange tenseness about her. He was sure it had to do with the argument they had about Bijou the other week, yet once again he chose not to comment. He hardly knew her, and it would be rude for him to poke his nose where it didn't belong. Although he had received a summons from the Hokage asking for Shisui not to mention the conversation to anyone besides the two blondes and Sensei. Shisui stood beside his Aunt Mikoto as she spoke to her red-headed friend, Kushina Uzumaki. The woman seemed very nice, however she was also very loud and energetic. She had the longest and straightest red hair he had ever seen. If he had to compare her to someone it had to be his blonde classmate. She had the same personality, and also had bright long hair, just not as long of Kushina's was, plus it was blonde not red. He had to spend the day with his aunt as his father was working with Uncle Fugaku at the UPF. He had been going there and on missions far more often these days, yet the boy chose not to comment on it. Kushina cooed at his cousin, Itachi, who was in his aunt's arms. "He's so cute, Mikoto. I heard you had a boy but I don't know what you named him?" She laid a finger on his cousin and cooed when he followed the movement. "We named him Itachi. He's 16 months old now," replied his Aunt Mikoto as they all carried on walking. His aunt had just picked him up from the academy, and now they were on their way home when the redhead had caught sight of them and yelled for them as she waved her hands, a broad smile that showed too many teeth to go with it. "It's been so long since I've seen you in the village, Kushina. How have you been? And how is little Naruto?" At the sound of his classmate's name he looked to the two women, unsure how either of them knew the blonde. "I've been great, Databane. They need my help out on the front lines now that the war has been announced. And as for Naruto, I'm not too sure, Tabane. I haven't been in the village for a few weeks." She seemed to have a similar verbal tic that the blonde also had, as she liked to randomly shout out Databeo, and for the life of him, he couldn't understand what it meant. "I heard. Is there nothing that can be done about it? Another war, especially so soon, would make things harder just after we got things back together." They went past the shop Auntie usually took him to, yet chose not to mention it, and further listened to the women's conversation. "And it's a pity about not having seen the girl. I haven't been introduced to her yet, so I don't know if she'll be alright with the arrangements." Aunt Mikoto looked nervous as she spoke, which was unusual for the Uchiha matriarch. "How do you know?" began Shisui, yet was interrupted by a loud yell. "Naruto!" Shisui turned, startled by the sudden shout. Lo and behold, Naruto was running away from what seemed to be a crazy purple-haired female who was holding as well as throwing kunai at the laughing blonde. Without thinking he grabbed a hold of the blonde before she passed them. However, he hadn't been prepared for her to end up taking him with her wherever she was going. "Hey, Naruto! What's going on? Who's chasing us and why?" he asked as they continued to run through the village. "Anko Midarashi. She's the apprentice of the snake Chunin. I insulted him since she insulted Arrowtowsen, and she didn't seem to like the comment. She was laughing as she barely avoided a crate of apples being loaded, the shop owner yelling at them causing Shisui to shout an apology. Naruto turned and threw a kunai at something which dropped a bucket of sludge on the purple girl, causing her to pause before she shrieked, exclaiming she would kill the blonde for this. At the threat Naruto laughed at grabbed a hold of Shisui again as she yelled, "We had best get out of her way, Tebeo. Or she'll skin us." She laughed again as they made their way through the streets of Konoha. It surprised him. Naruto seemed to know every nook and cranny about the roads despite having only lived in the village for over a month. In fact, she seemed to know far more than he did, and he had lived here since his birth. She dragged them into an alley and forced them behind the stacked crates. Placing a hand over his mouth, she listened out for the loud voice of Miss Mitarashi, and heard her speak between breaths, "Hey Hataki. Have you seen that blonde brat? Enko. First, there is no need to speak in such an undignified way, you're a kunoichi, so act like it. Unless you forget, there are lots of blondes in Konoha. The most common would be the Yamanaka. If you want me to answer your question, detail it," replied the person she had called Hataki, which he assumed had to be Kakashi. Short, loud, shocking long blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks and a real pain in people's asses. Seen her around? There was a long pause before he heard fabric shuffling. "Not since she was at my place the other day, Kakashi," replied Enko in a monotone voice. "You realize she's a kid, right? Not like that, you perverted female. She's Minato-sensei's sister. She has a habit of making herself home at my place," snapped Kakashi. Shisui looked at Naruto, who seemed to be on the verge of laughing. "Gah! I don't have time for you," yelled Enko as she ran off in a fruitless pursuit of the blonde. "Naruto Namazake. What did you do this time?" asked Kakashi as he looked to the blonde. He saw the Uchiha and questioned who he was. "I insulted the honor of her lord and savior, Orochimaru, after she insulted Arrowtowsen. And this is she Uchiha. You know, the one Obito likes to call a bratish pain in his arse." She removed the hand on his mouth as they got up from their crouched positions. "Sanapi meet Shisui Uchiha, Shisui meet Kakashi Hataki. If you think the Uchiha clan have no personalities, you haven't met Kakashi. We already met the other week during the whole argument with Minato," Shisui replied awkwardly. How had she forgotten they had already met? But it made sense as she hasn't been the one to do the introductions as it had been his cousin. "Brat. Remember, there is a hierarchy. Enko and I are your superiors and you will act like a subordinate." Naruto was right, he was worse than his clan. How that was possible eluded him, yet chose once again not to comment. Ever since meeting the blonde he had been wanting answers when he knew he wouldn't get any. Kakashi left not long after having spoken to the blonde that any shinobi would be able to track her, to which she had said that Enko clearly couldn't. They had then gotten into a bet stating that there was no way Naruto could get into the missions room and paint a message without getting caught. The bet consisted of Naruto owing Kakashi 3 days of meals if she lost and Kakashi owing her 2 training sessions with Obito, and the catch was he couldn't complain. He had then requested to change the bet to 5 days, to which she had agreed. She was after all asking a lot of the boy apparently. They had also agreed on Naruto's A&BU detail not counting, as they wouldn't see if they hadn't been forced to watch her every move. Somehow Shisui had no choice but to join them, and after getting a bottle of easily removable spray paint, they all made their way to the tower. Not even 6 minutes later Naruto came back looking very pleased with herself as she stated what she wrote. "You need to work on your sensory abilities. A 5-year-old broke in and did some vandalism." She had clenched a hand over her stomach as she laughed over what she had done, causing Shisui to also laugh, however in a far more dignified manner. However, Shisui stopped laughing when he remembered what he had been doing before this mess. More specifically, who he had been with. Naruto apologized and escorted him home so she could explain what had happened and to introduce herself to the matriarch. It was then that Shisui found out that Mikoto was in line to look after Naruto, yet he was not told who the rest were. With the arrival of a new week came the arrival of the event Naruto had been looking greatly towards. The survival outing that would take place in the Forest of Death. Since her arrival she had not gone into the forest, and now she got a chance to enter without causing any suspicion. A bonus to being out in nature was that her A&BU weren't allowed anywhere near her. They had to stand guard outside the forest, but it wouldn't be that easy. Just outside the forest was a river and mountains that had been previously caged off in her time, yet that had not been created yet. The river, she found out, led to Naka River. The river had a lot of history in Naruto's mind, and she also assumed the reason it had been blocked off was either because it made the forest even more dangerous or because following the river would lead to the Uchiha district. She had been unable to do anything outside of Konoha, but that did not mean she couldn't do anything inside her borders. She had met up with Kakashi several times with Obito, and they seemed to be able to stand each other's presences for more than an hour before one of them snapped. In her book that was progress, Sasuke and she couldn't last that long without some form of incentive when they had been their age. Then there was the matter of getting the Hokage's attention to peace. That agenda was also going very well. 4 days after Kurama woke up she had been contacted by Agama of Mount Mayaboku stating that the Agama Sannin knew she was here and that her contract was still in place. This had made things a lot easier, as she could send messages to the Hokage under the pretense of an unknown Gama Sannin helping out Konoha. Of course Jiraiya had been questioned, however, when Lord Fukasaku came and said they could not say who the sage was, the old man had dropped it. The Lord had also managed to get an agreement from the Hokage. The ANBU detail would leave Naruto the moment she became a genin, as he wished to personally train her in the Gamma way, to which he had agreed. Consequently, Jiraiya had mumbled about how his sensei listened to an old toad and not him. She was bought out of her musings as she stood by her team. Everyone had been placed in groups of 3, which was made easier as 2 students had been pulled out of the academy the previous week. However, who was going to lead their team was unknown, and they wouldn't find out till they arrived at the outskirts of the forest. She had sensed them, yet she merely assumed they were in a different art to where she was headed. Minato, Kakashi, Obito, Rin, all of her Jonin instructors from her time were there. She stood next to her teammate Shisui. They were supposed to go in groups of 3, however a large amount of kids had caught a virus that was going around the village, so they made it so there was 2 per team. They walked upon Team Minato and Naruto tried to ignore Shisui's behavior, yet she wasn't that courteous. "What's wrong? You seem shifty?" He looked at her, slightly startled as if he hadn't expected her to speak up. "I noticed we're going to where your brother is." It took Naruto a few moments to figure out what he was trying to get at, causing her to scratch the back of her neck. It's fine. It was just an argument. Things are tense, but I've been in more awkward situations. One particular awkward situation was when Sasuke tried to kill Sakura as she tried to kill him, Kakashi trying to stop them from killing each other as Obito disguised as Madara, and Naruto arrived saving Sakura whilst getting poisoned. She tried her hardest to hide her awkwardness with her drive to bring Sasuke, but of course the bastard couldn't see it and left with his psychopathic relative. She was brought back to reality as Obito jumped on her back, causing her to stumble forwards, and she would have landed on her face had Kakashi not reached out his hand to grab a hold of her arm. She looked at him, giving him a smile. "Thanks." She then looked to Obito, ignoring the fact Kakashi was glaring at him as he crossed his arms. Obito deserved it this time. She was about to speak up when she noticed Shisui looking to Minato and decided to talk to him instead. "Hey, Aniki." She gave him a smile which she hoped had more happiness than she felt. She was still sore about the whole incident but was mostly over it. Besides, graduation was only a few months away, so it was some relief. He gave her a bright smile in return and ruffled her hair when he saw she didn't move from him, clearly happy about the sudden change in her behavior to him. "How are you, Naruto?" "I'm great. Are you guys staying for the survival lesson?" she asked, genuinely curious about what they were doing there. "In a way. All Genin and myself will be taking part to make it a 3-man cell whilst we get experience being with people outside of our team, under our care, who are less experienced than us," explained Kakashi as he dragged Obito away from his cousin who looked thoroughly harassed. It was a fun sight to behold, Shisui no Shunshin puffing out his cheeks which were pink as he pouted with crossed arms. So does anyone know who's going with which team?" asked Shisui after he received a light pat on the back from Rin. They were interrupted by a kunai flying their direction. Thankfully this time Minato caught it. They all looked up to see Anko, causing Naruto to hide slightly behind Minato's leg. She was not afraid, not at all. She was simply making a tactical decision to hide from a bomb. For her part, Anko blushed a deep red as soon as she got to them and noticed who it was Naruto was hiding behind. Everyone refrained from raising their brows or even questioning it. However, there was someone there who didn't have the same level of intuity as the rest of them did. "Heh, Anko. What's with the red face?" The comment got him a fierce glare from the Snake Senin's apprentice as she took a step forward as a warning. Naruto, understanding the tense air, spoke up. "I'm sure it's because of the sun. It's a lot hotter here than it is in Taki or AIM. In fact, it rains like all the time in AIM." She rambled as she made random gestures with her hands. Her distraction worked as everyone forgot the previous conversation and moved back to her original conversation. "Well, Rin is going to be with Yumino-san's team, Obito with the Kimichi-san's team, and Kakashi is going to be with the 2 of you. Who will you be with, Anko-san?" spoke Minato as he looked to the girl, which made her blush again. I'll be paired with Izumo and Kotetsu." Those guys actually fought to be on the same team. This caused them all to chuckle except for Naruto, whose eyes were full of mirth as she regarded Kakashi. The silver-haired boy caught her look at her wearily. "So senpai, should I call you Kakashi-sensei?" Obito, Minato and Shisui stifled their laughs behind their hands as they looked on to see Kakashi's reaction. "You will do no such thing. I wanted no part of this before. If you call me that, I'll want to take part in it less." She pouted as she jumped on his back, arms around his neck, making him hold on to her legs for fear what his sensei would do if he dropped the man's only sister. "You're no fun, sensei. You need to let loose." She chuckled into his ear, causing him to grit his teeth. "Naruto," spoke Minato. It was amazing how one deadpan voice could catch everyone's attention. "I think you've been spending too much time with Jiraiya-sensei. He most certainly has been having a bad effect on you." "No, I haven't. And don't blame Erotausen. He's perfectly innocent." Once the words came out of her mouth, she shook her head. "He was not innocent." "Okay, he's innocent when he isn't staring at large, flirting with women, or writing his hentai. But other than that, he's innocent." The statement caused Shisui to blush and for everyone else to blink twice before they all checked their ears to make sure they didn't hear her wrong. They looked at each other and noticed they had in fact not heard her wrong, and the 6-year-old had just said all of that. Before any of them could berate her or Jiraiya, the teacher began to speak. Welcome, everyone, to Training Ground 44. Also known as the Forest of Death. In this forest you will spend a day getting from one point in the map to the other point. You must also find and bring back one item that is on each of your maps. There are 3 items on each map, giving you plenty of options to choose from. The Jonin instructors have allowed us to these young genin and chunin in this lesson. Make sure to listen to them. They will complete the 3-man cells as well as ensure you have a qualified leader. Team leaders, please go to your designated teams and the 3 of you will line up and collect your things. With that, everyone bid their farewells and scattered to where their teams were. So, we're supposed to be looking for a golden kunai. Where do people come up with this sort of stuff? Yelled Naruto as they passed the next golden item. So far it had been over an hour, and they had seen 3 golden items, none of which happened to be a kunai. Well, we're also looking for a blue and black seashell with the Konoha symbol carved on it. Spoke Shisui, as if it actually made things any better. And that's another thing. If they wanted us to look for stuff, why couldn't it be something interesting like a sealing scroll or a scroll of jutsu? That would be a lot more interesting than a bunch of shiny things. Naruto, you need to keep your voice low. There are a lot of creatures here in the forest that can kill you, and if you die, Minato-sensei will make my life an absolute hell. Spoke Kakashi as he glared at her. He seemed to be in a fouler mood than usual today. Most likely due to the fact he hates kids and other people in general. That and Naruto sure as hell was talking a lot. She chose to whisper to Shisui about how she could imagine Kakashi as an Uchiha, both sniggering as they thought of it. They made it to the river and it didn't take them very quickly where they found their seashell, Kakashi putting it in a sealing scroll before they started hiking up the mountain to where the kunai should be. Keyword should. There were lots of things in places where they shouldn't be, meaning someone had tampered with the field, making everyone's life a lot harder than it had to be. Once they reached the top, Kakashi ducked and Naruto shoved Shisui to the ground as 3 kunai came their way. Naruto and Shisui grunted as her eyes turned yellow, yet she managed to keep Kurama from unleashing his chakra. It would do none of them any good right now. That of course did not stop the ninja from grabbing a hold of her and holding a kunai to her neck. So original, she thought sarcastically with an eye roll slash. What are IWA ninja doing in Konoha? Asked Naruto as Kakashi forced Shisui behind him. There were 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing Kumo headbands, but she knew they were from IWA. They reeked or the Tsuchikage and the smell of IWA as well. Now what makes you think we're from IWA? Our headbands clearly state we're from Kumo, spoke the woman, in a teasing condescending voice, making Naruto wish she could rip out her vocal cords. Just because she was in the body of a child does not mean she needed to be treated like one. You smell of a Wakagure as well as the Tsuchikage. If Inoki has a problem with Konoha's children, tell him to come here himself instead of sending his people to attack us. Kakashi at this point was inching his hand closer and closer to his tanto but knew he couldn't draw it out, not without them most likely cutting her throat. They dug the kunai deeper into her neck. Shut your mouth, little girl, or we'll show you what IWA are really capable of. She lady hissed. Naruto fought back a flinch as it was digging into her skin without breaking it. I'm shaking in my sandals. You've come to attack children. Children. None of us are even 10, and you want to kill us. I take that as a sign of weakness. Why didn't you try to kill of our elder Chunin or Jonin? Because you don't have the will of stone that your Kage preaches of. She taunted as she discreetly released some ki, hoping someone would notice and come help. That comment caused the lady to break her skin. Shut up. What does a little wet-nosed brat know of our people? The will of stone is forever. It shall never perish. We are the will of stone, spoke the man with short brown hair. He was clearly on something, since no one can be a will of anything. Sure, you can be an example of it, but not be a manifestation of it. To think that someone like you calls himself the will of anything. It's not only ridiculous, it's pathetic. She unleashed 7 of her tails to wrap around their necks, mindful not to let the chakra touch her. She and Kurama had been practicing. As long as he didn't coat her in too much chakra she was okay, so unleashing the tails alone had been their agreed plan for a situation like this. Naruto! Yelled Kakashi and Shisui, eyes wide as they looked at her. Like this, it's fine. As long as I'm not shrouded. They both looked uncertain as they gave a small nod in her direction, both coming to stand beside her. Kakashi took out his tanto as he looked at them with cold eyes. Now, really? Why are you here? He didn't get a chance to hear the answer as they all began screaming in agony, Kurama's chakra burning them from the outside in. She released her tails and they all fell to the ground, yelling in agony. Their yells must have been very loud as not even a minute later the ANB were here. As she thought about it, she assumed they left their posts due to her sudden burst of chakra and ki. Naruto, care to explain this? Asked the ANBU in the panda mask. They tried to kill me and my defense mechanism activated and wrapped around their throats, burning them in the process. She asked more than stated, causing skepticism to cover their eyes before looking to Kakashi, who gave them a nod, confirming that that was what had happened. The ANBU took them and allowed them to carry on with their task, collecting the shell they had come up there for. As they carried on walking they heard a loud scream that was fading before hearing a loud splash. They all turned around and saw Obito leaning against the waterfall, struggling with something. They went to him to see what was going on, ignoring Kakashi's dispute on how it was a set mission for each individual to take control of. Obito was in fact trying to pull up Dodo Akimichi, however due to his heavy mass Obito seemed to be struggling. "Hey, Obito, need any help?" asked Naruto as she leaned forwards to help pick him up. "Never mind the two of us, if none of you mind, someone help the genin that fell in the water. I don't think he can swim properly since he's got an injured arm." The three of them looked at each other before Naruto dove straight in, causing both boys of her team to yell at her. She dove in, head first before reaching out her head to breathe. She looked for the person Obito was talking about, and saw that he was trying to keep a hold on a boulder that was in the river. The current was strong so she didn't have to put much effort into making it over to him. She stopped at the boulder, however with the strong current it caused her to hit her arm against it. Ignoring the sting of pain it brought, she yelled, "Hey, I'm here to help, okay? Just hold on tight whilst I try to tie us up." She reached down for the rope in her pocket. As she did so a sharp object cut her leg, making it bleed, but it started to heal almost instantaneously. She saw Kakashi walk down the waterfall and over to them, so she spoke, "Kakashi, I need you to take this rope and help pull us out the water. If not, tie it onto something so we can pull ourselves out." He nodded, and once she had the rope tied around her classmate whose name she didn't remember, he took the rope and tied it to a tree, helping to pull the other girl out of the water. Once she was out, Kakashi threw the rope over to her, and she gripped it tightly, pulling herself out as Kakashi and the girl tried to get her out. It was a lot quicker than getting the shorter female out as there were more people helping this time, however that didn't stop them from groaning. They were all wet, and most likely, by the evening they would all have fevers as well. Minus Naruto, who never got sick. Obito, Doto and Shisui made it to them not long after as they were still catching their breaths. "Are you guys alright?" asked Obito as he rubbed the back of his neck. When no one replied, he started inspecting each of them hurriedly from top to bottom, making sure they were alright as he spoke so fast that Naruto couldn't make such sense of what he had been saying. What she did understand was that he was very embarrassed for needing their help, and was very pleased Kakashi had helped despite him being a baka. In fact, he had a complete new word just for Kakashi, Bakashi. Oh, she was so going to use that when he's being an idiot. Or not. The girl who had fallen in the water was called Mikasa, and she was an orphan, who was also at least 2 years older than them and was highly embarrassed for having to be saved by people younger than her. To which Kakashi had to point out Obito was their leader and technically needed help from 2 students as well, causing the 2 of them to argue as a storm suddenly befell the forest. Naruto sat up with a jolt. They had taken a rest to dry up and other things, yet she hadn't remembered falling asleep. She looked around to see others had also fallen asleep, minus Kakashi who was watching over them. "You alright there, senpai?" she asked quietly, knowing he would hear her anyway. He gave her no reply, but both of their attentions turned to a moan of pain that sounded from Misaki. Brows furrowed, she leaned over to where she was, next to Doto, and touched her, and was very shocked to feel she was very warm. If something felt very warm to Naruto, it was most likely hot due to the fact that she ran on a high temperature anyway. She looked back to Kakashi and spoke, "Can you come and check her temperature? I think she has a fever." Kakashi stood up promptly and checked her forehead, nodding to Naruto that she did indeed have a fever. She sighed and ruffled through her bag to see if she had any pills in her scrolls, but no such luck. She hardly needed medical treatment outside of Kurama, so she never felt the need to carry any. That and Sakura and her could heal almost anything without the need of medication. She asked Kakashi to see if he had any, yet he had said he hadn't packed any, thinking it wouldn't be necessary for such a short journey. Making sure she was the only one who had a temperature, Naruto groaned when Kakashi stated that Doto and Obito also had fevers. Obito's, however, was a lot cooler than the others and would most likely be fine after a short nap. The rain hadn't let up, they were wet in the middle of the forest of death, and they had 3 men down. Great. Things seemed to only get worse from there. Despite having taken a nap, Obito's fever remained and the others simply got worse. Kakashi hid his feelings well, yet Naruto could feel them. He was nervous and very irritated. He had assured himself he was able to do anything he put his mind to as long as he followed the rules. However, there were no set rules for this. It was never an option for a team to leave for a mission without proper supplies, and for them to fall ill. Naruto was unsure what to say as well. She could still sense danger lurking by, but she had been feeling that ever since she met Orochimaru. Feeling for people's chakra would be of no use. She didn't know these people and there could be good behind the bad they showed. It was Shisui who broke the silence. Could I make a suggestion?" His speaking up had been a wake-up call for them, where Kakashi most likely thought he had a lot of baggage, aka the ill people. Naruto had been thinking she could use the Kagebunshin, but that was impossible till she had better chakra control. However, Shisui was here and that gave them another set of hands, feet, and brains. Kakashi gave the boy a nod and he gulped at the sudden attention. "We could each carry one of them and return to the meetup location." Before he could finish, Kakashi spoke up, "The purpose is to find the items on our list. We would have to find items on their list also or they don't pass." It shocked her that he had even thought of their assignment, or that he even contemplated that they would have to do work for the other team. Whilst Naruto was all for teamwork and camaraderie in a unit, she drew a line where it came to doing each other's work. A person would only learn through experience. Well, that was always how she learned. "No, we won't. They fell ill and are now disqualified due to their incapability to complete the task." "I agree with Shisui's plan. We can carry them whilst we go looking for the rest of the things we need. Kakashi scrutinized the two of them before looking back at the three on the ground before nodding his head, the three of them carrying their task with extra struggles. October 18 months. Naruto wasn't sure if she should be irritated or happy about the situation. Okay, she knew she should be irritated because there was no way she could be happy about it. The announcement of curriculum change had happened 2 weeks ago, and it mostly detailed that students in the academy had to complete a certain number of D-rank missions in order to graduate. Naruto had plenty of free time and had decided to do them all in one go, 1 mission a day. However, Jiraiya liked to add a small twist to these missions, stating that she had to do each one in record time, and she had managed to do so. Out of 12 missions she had done 11 as she had had days of extensive training, and couldn't go about taking a mission. As to why she was irritated, well, let's go back a bit. Iruka hadn't taken his first mission, so he had requested that Naruto and Shisui, who had already completed 2 missions, to join him in selecting a mission. Both of them found they were unable to say no to him, so they had agreed. This all led up to Iruka getting a mission, and now he was requesting help with it. With any other mission she would have given a smile and helped no matter what, however this was different. This was a dangerous D-rank mission that ought to be labeled as a C rank given how dangerous it was. One never finished this mission without some form of an injury, usually a bleeding one. Capturing and returning Tora the cat. Naruto was certain that thing wasn't a cat. Whilst she didn't get along with cats very much, that was Sasuke's territory. She didn't think it was possible for any cat could be crueler than Matatabi, who was a demon, yet Tora ranked above the two-tailed cat. She looked toward Shisui with uncertain eyes. With the three of them together it would make things a lot easier, and she had managed to successfully complete the Kagebunshin during the last few months. She couldn't make as many as she could initially, but at least she could make some. It made her training faster as well. She sighed in resignation. It would help get them another mission in their total, and looked to the Uchiha, who shrugged as if saying, "What you gonna do?" With the help of 4 Kagebunshin they managed to find Tora and capture him with claw scratches brandishing the boy's arms when they arrived 87 minutes after having been given the mission. Naruto had also been scratched, however they had been long since healed. It was a miracle the boys hadn't seen her injury, or she would have a hard time explaining it to Iruka. Shisui had been a witness to her abilities previously, so there would have been no explaining to do with him. Never again. If you get a capture Tora the cat mission again, even if we agree to help, we're not gonna, Tebeo. I swear, Tora is a demon. Demon, I tell you, yelled Naruto as the three of them made their way through Konoha. Her sudden yell caused several people to jump slightly, and shinobis to subconsciously reach for their weapons. She rolled her eyes at their paranoia. There was no way anyone would sneak into Konoha's defense system with the martial law in place. Anyone who entered or exited was checked thoroughly. One of the gate guards was also either a Hyuga or Uchiha, as their Dijitsu Kekiagenkai allowed them to notice henges a lot easier than the naked eye. Of course, both families has initially protested, stating that they would have a better use on the battlefield. However, both had stopped when a spy infiltrated and one of their clansmen had noticed. They knew the importance and had made sure that there was always a member of either or both clans on guard. She had once imagined what Izumo and Kotetsu would look like with the Dijitsus and laughed. It would have made their relationship a lot more scandalous than it had been originally. A Hyuga and Uchiha together, she had to be forced by Jiraiya to stop laughing at the mere thought of it. As they walked Iruka home, they went past the barbecue place and noticed 2 distinct people and 2 not quite distinct people. Minato, Kakashi, Rin and Obito. She was going to avoid them as she was still shaky around Minato, however Iruka was exactly like her as a child, a loudmouth who couldn't read the room even if his life depended on it. He insisted that the 3 of them join Team Minato, not listening even when they had stated that they would be intruding. His reply had been that Naruto was Minato's sister, and Kakashi was practically besotted with her as well. Obito. Of course that had simply caused her to hit the boy over the head, explaining how they were being very protective over her as to not upset Minato, and not because they fancied her. Which in turn went to her explain the love triangle in Team Minato. Obito was in love with Rin, who was in love with Kakashi, who was in love with the rules. This, of course, did not stop him from dragging them to the table across, causing Naruto and Shisui to sigh before they ordered something to eat. Obito and Iruka were also very similar, both unable to read the room, and insisted that the 3 of them join since he had yet to be introduced to Iruka. They all moved to a larger table, Minato at the head, Naruto between Kakashi and Shisui, where Rin was between Obito and Iruka. "Are you scared of Rin? Is that why you're sitting next to me?" She whispered in his ear, and thanks to many years of knowing Kakashi she was able to see the smallest twitch of his brow indicating he didn't like her question. Leaning low enough, he replied into her ear, "You and I both know that's not the reason." Quirking a brow, she placed her chin on her hand. "Oh, pray tell, what is?" She didn't receive a verbal reply, and instead he looked to Rin and Obito a few times till she got it. In order to get Rin out of her fancy for Kakashi, the 2 of them had taken to setting the 2 genins up whenever they could, and this was just one of those instances. Chuckling to herself, she gave him a quick peck on the cheek. "You know, I'd be a bit cautious of this. I know it was my idea, but people seem to be getting the idea you fancy me, and that won't do with your reputation. I'm also certain my brother would try to make your life as miserable as humanly possible." This caused his eyes to grow a fraction as he felt a sudden spike of killing intent coming off the elder blonde, who was smiling. It was a very distinct smile as well that reminded him of Kushina whenever Minato upset her. Yandere smile. A shiver went down both of their spines as they straightened, Naruto nervously rubbing the back of her head whereas Kakashi remained stoic on the outside. So how's it going, Rin? I haven't seen you that much, spoke the younger blonde, hoping her father/brother would cut out his ki, or she was certain Irika would flee on sight. The brunette looked to her with a bright smile, however it didn't fully reach her eyes. Well, I've been mostly cooped up with my medic work. Whenever Team Minato is given time off, I'm at the hospital training myself to become a better medic. Naruto have her a wide grin. Well, I have no doubt that you'll be an amazing medic. After all, you have so much time to practice at the hospital and on Obito, of course. You wanna repeat that, blondie? Yelled an indignant Obito Uchiha. She liked Obito a lot. He was like that annoying older brother she never wanted, however she often had this small problem whenever he was muttering about his Sharingan. All she could see was Tobi, half his face in swirls with one Sharingan eye as he tried to kill the 5 nations. Shaking her head slightly, she smirked to the Uchiha opposite her, however before she could say something Shisui spoke up, cousin please. There's no need to be rude to Naruto. And what does her hair color have to do with anything? It's the exact same shade as your sensei. Naruto and Obito blinked olishly at him before Minato sighed. Well, in any event, Naruto, have you decided who you're staying with tonight? Jiraiya-sensei is out of the village and I'm getting dispatched tonight. You already know Kushina is out of town. She slowly nodded and spoke. I'll head off to the Uchiha compound and stay with Mikoto-san. I even volunteered to look after little Itachi as well. She had bumped into Mikoto by accident the other day when she had gone shopping with Kushina. The Uchiha matriarch had been holding a very small, very chubby and very adorable Itachi Uchiha who was most likely only a few months old. It had been a huge shock to her system to see the man turn baby like that. She knew how babies came along, and knew his mother would have gone through natural procedures to have him, however she had never thought he would look so adorable. Adorable wasn't something she ever had in mind when she saw or thought of the most loyal shinobi. Alluring was more of a befitting word for the late tall, dark-haired Uchiha. You know Aunt Mikoto? Asked Obito, mouth full of food. Kinda? I met her the other day when I was out with Kushina doing some shopping, and we ended up staying with her for a few hours. That was when I said whenever I was at her home I'd help with little Itachi. But I technically met her when I returned Shisui after kidnapping him. She gave a shrug as if a 6-year-old volunteering to help babysit a newborn was something they should be used to. Well, it was easier to believe than her kidnapping someone. Not long later they all parted ways, however Naruto left with the 2 Uchihas over to the Uchiha district, Obito giving commentary about this building, that shop and such, whereas Shisui simply walked beside her in silence. She took in the sight of the district, and tried her hardest to memorize all the details. It looked so different now that it had living people within it. Sasuke hardly allowed anyone within the district walls besides herself, and the Jinchuriki when they wanted a physical meeting in Konoha. It was odd, nothing about the district was different, yet the people seemed to make all the difference. She had a small and tentative smile on her face as she looked at everyone they went by, all of them wearing the Uchiha crest on their backs, and she tried not to think how these smiling, lively people had planned a coup that was have caused the civil war. Part of her was slightly guilty about not paying rigorous attention to what Obito was saying, however there was a chakra signature that was nearby that was catching her attention. Root. She had fully formulated her plans for Danzo, however would like it if he could live. Sure, he was a bastard that deserved a few hours with Kurama and Ti, however he was a vital part of this war. She could deal with him at a later time if he causes any trouble she can't prevent. Jiraiya had managed to get word to his 3 AIM students via his Gamma messengers, however there was only so much talking would do. Hanzo was a large and definite problem that needed to be dealt with sooner or later, preferably sooner. The problem with that though was Hanzo was way too powerful for her to deal with unless she got all her powers back. He had after all won against the 3 Sannin whilst on his own. And the poison he could emit could also be another problem. She shook her head, missing the concerned look she was receiving, and followed the boys to the Uchiha head's house. Once they were outside, Obito began to fidget and made an excuse about why he was leaving them and left to be anywhere but near Fugaku. She didn't blame him. She had only ever met the man once, which had been an accident, and whilst he said nothing to her, he had a very imposing figure, and the infamous Uchiha resting bitch face on him, causing him to look even scarier. Of course, those silly tactics won't work on her anymore since she was nearly 19, technically, and had to face up against Madara Uchiha Hu and Kagaya, and the 5 Kage, and paperwork. She shuddered at the thought. Despite the fact she had to use of Kagebunshin to get her paperwork done quicker, she had never really liked for them to deal with it, so she did some whilst the clone did some. The rest of her duties would be overseen by her clones instead. Mikoto had opened the door, so after a formal greeting, the 2 classmates entered the home, which was when she tried to note all the differences in the home. The colors were the same, some of the furniture was the same, others different, and there was lots of pictures up as well. Those were something Sasuke had promptly taken down after the massacre, and especially since he had moved back into the district upon his return. Giggling brought her out of her musings as she noticed they were in the living room, where there was a dark blue Moses basket, and inside was baby Itachi. They both made their way over to him, Naruto skipping, however Shisui being the proper and dignified Uchiha he was simply walked over. Naruto, after asking, was allowed to pick up the younger Uchiha who was trying to tug at her hair. I won't allow you any pain this time. I won't allow the coup and I won't allow you to be pained by your clan like you were last time. I'm the Jinchuriki and I already know all we need to know about Akatsuki. I will let everyone love you though, the love the people never gave whilst you were alive. She thought to herself. Itachi had once been the village's messiah, their most loyal shinobi, and she refused to allow him to feel such pain he had felt during his life again. She had even gotten a Raikage to agree on the man, and had been further gratified when Inoki had also reluctantly agreed, giving his own praise to the prodigy. Even in death he had been loyal as shown during the Fourth War. A giggle brought her out of her thoughts as Itachi had managed to tug on a lock of her hair, and instead of scowling like some of the Konoha 11 would have, she simply smiled and laughed it off. Thoughts of what the future would be like had no part in her daily life, except when she was with Jiraiya, and she should remember that. Trapping oneself in a future that she was determined to not allow to happen would do no good to anyone. I decline, spoke Jiraiya. He had just returned to Konoha and had gone straight to the Hokage's office in order to report his mission and proceed to pick up Naruto from the academy. However, the Sandaime was having other thoughts. I want her in this office and I want a full sweep of her mind. It is for Konoha's safety that I say this, he replied as he took a puff of his pipe. Jiraiya gave his Hokage a glare. She is a little girl. Having someone else in her mind could damage it beyond repair. She already has a bijou in her head, do you want to add to that? He gave no time for his Kage to reply as he carried on, and to top it off, you have nothing to gain for going through her mind. She was raised by me in aim, so there is nothing for you to see but me training the three brats whilst she was around. The Sandaime raised a hand to stop Jiraiya from rambling further. If you will not allow me to have a sweep of her mind, then she will need a sanity check another way. Jiraiya waved both his hands in the air, annoyance over the situation winning over his patience. Sanity check. And how insane can a little ball of sunshine be exactly? I know you spy on her from time to time with that glass ball of yours, sensei, so you must see how she is. Indeed I do, Jiraiya. It was through seeing her that I came up with the idea of checking her mind. She often mutters to herself even when people are around. He began signing some of the documents on the desk, and Jiraiya was sorely tempted to get some kids to throw such a ruckus. It would give the old man a lot more paperwork, however, decided against it. She either mutters to herself over ideas or when she talks to the bijou. That's it. He decided to ignore the fact Naruto also had another personality lurking her mind. It was her professional persona she had stated was for when she had gone on S-rank missions before her time as Kage. The Sandaime gave no immediate reply and instead finished reading and signing the document before crossing his fingers under his chin. Sighing, he closed his eyes before speaking. Since you seem to have an answer for everything, I will let it all slide. However, I will keep asking questions, and if I do not receive an answer I am 100% happy with, she will undergo the Yamanaka clan technique. Dismissed. He waved Jiraiya out the room, who ground his teeth together before making his way over to the academy to go pick up Naruto early. It would be fun to see how she would try to make it seem like she didn't already know he was in the village.